What if the secret to a stronger, more connected life has been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years? Picture this standing at dawn in the heart of ancient Rome, where the first light of day wasn't met with screens or caffeine, but with purposeful rituals designed to align body, mind, and community. From the disciplined morning routines of Spartan warriors to the meticulous hygiene practices of the Indus Valley, ancient civilizations didn't just survive, they thrived through daily habits so powerful, they shaped the course of history. And here's the astonishing part, many of these rituals still hold transformative power today, offering lessons we've forgotten in our modern rush. Think about your own mornings. How often do you start the day with intention, like the Egyptians who greeted the sunrise with gratitude and stretching rituals handed down from the gods themselves? Or the Japanese tea masters who turned a simple drink into a meditation on presence and harmony? These weren't just quirky traditions, they were lifelines. Ancient Greeks believed their daily walks were as vital as philosophy, while Ayurvedic healers in India structured entire days around natural rhythms we now call biohacking. The truth is, our ancestors didn't have apps or productivity hacks, they had something better. Time-tested practices woven into the fabric of their lives, proven over centuries. So why does this matter to you? Because buried in these 35 ancient habits are solutions to problems we still face. Stress, disconnection, the struggle to focus. Imagine discovering how a Babylonian breathing technique could lower your blood pressure, or how Viking bedtime rituals might cure your insomnia. This isn't just history, it's a blueprint. Over the next few minutes, we'll unravel these lost routines piece by piece, and you'll walk away with more than just fascinating trivia. You'll find tools to transform your own days, just as they did thousands of years ago. Ready to step into their world? Let's begin. Long before alarm clocks and morning scrolls, the people of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia greeted each day with rituals that bridged the earthly and the divine. For them, dawn wasn't just a time to wake, it was a sacred threshold, a moment when the gods were closest to the human world. Picture an Egyptian priest rising before the sun, his first act not reaching for a cup of coffee, but for a handful of natron, a sacred salt blend from the Nile shores. This wasn't merely about fresh breath, it was an act of purification, a way to cleanse the body and soul before addressing the deities. They believed impurities blocked communication with the divine, so every morning began with this meticulous ritual, followed by washing the face with fragrant oils like myrrh or frankincense, substances so precious they were often reserved for temples and royalty. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, the rituals were just as deliberate. A scribe might start his day by pouring water over his hands 3 times, a gesture echoing their creation myth where order emerged from primordial waters. These weren't empty gestures, they were daily reenactments of cosmic balance. Even the act of dressing held meaning. Linen garments in Egypt were chosen for their purity, believed to reflect the radiance of the sun god Ra. And as the first light touched the ziggurats of Babylon, priests would chant hymns to Shamash, the sun god, their voices rising with the dawn to reaffirm humanity's place in the universe. What's striking is how these routines blended the practical and the profound. The Egyptians used natron not just for ritual but for its antiseptic properties, unknowingly protecting their teeth from decay. Mesopotamian oil cleansers shielded skin from harsh desert winds while symbolizing anointment by the gods. These weren't superstitions, they were habits honed over generations, marrying survival with spirituality. Today, we might dismiss these practices as quaint, but consider this. Modern science confirms the antibacterial power of salt rinses, and skincare experts praise the benefits of oil cleansing. Our ancestors weren't just performing rituals, they were mastering the art of living well, layer by layer, sunrise after sunrise. So what can we learn from their mornings? It's more than just swapping toothpaste for salt or adding oils to your skincare routine. It's about reclaiming intention. For them, every action was a thread in a larger tapestry, connecting hygiene to health, health to spirituality, and spirituality to community. When they rinsed their mouths or anointed their skin, they weren't just caring for themselves, they were preparing to show up fully for their world. That's the real secret hidden in these ancient habits. The power of a morning ritual isn't in the steps themselves, but in the reverence they instill. How different might our days feel if we saw them not as tasks to rush through, but as sacred acts of preparation? While modern breakfast might mean a quick granola bar or avocado toast, ancient cultures turned their first meal into a cornerstone of daily life, shaped by the land, the gods, and the rhythms of community. Take the Romans, who saw breakfast not as a rushed affair but as a chance to fortify both body and social bonds. Their intaculum was simple yet deliberate, coarse bread dipped in watered wine, sometimes topped with olives, cheese, or dried figs. This wasn't just about convenience. The acidity of the wine acted as a natural preservative, while the bread's roughness scrubbed teeth clean, a practical detail in an era without toothbrushes. But there was deeper symbolism too. Sharing bread was a gesture of trust, a daily renewal of kinship that echoed in their saying, "Panem et circenses," bread and games as the glue of society. Halfway across the world, the Inca Empire built their mornings around quinoa, a sacred grain they called Chusaya Mama, or mother of all grains. High in the Andes, where frost clung to terraced fields, they simmered quinoa into hearty porridge with amaranth or mashed squash, sweetened with honey from stingless bees. This wasn't just sustenance, it was a nutritional masterpiece. Quinoa's complete proteins fueled laborers and warriors alike, while the act of eating it honored Pachamama, the earth goddess. Every spoonful was a covenant with the land, a reminder that food was a gift, not a commodity. Meanwhile, in ancient Greece, breakfast was often a prelude to philosophy. Wealthy Athenians might enjoy barley cakes drizzled with honey or figs, but the real ritual came later at the symposium, a morning gathering where men reclined on couches, debating ideas over wine diluted with seawater. The salt wasn't just for taste, it was a nod to their maritime identity, tying nourishment to the Aegean itself. Even their choice of wine mattered, light and floral at dawn, believed to stimulate the mind without dulling it. Contrast this with the frost-bound Norse, whose breakfasts were acts of defiance against the cold. A Viking's morning might start with skyr, a thick yogurt like curd, paired with rye bread so dense it could last for weeks aboard longboats. They'd wash it down with ale, even for children, not for intoxication, but because fermentation made water safer. Every bite was engineered for survival, yet infused with meaning. Butter was churned with symbols for protection, and bread was kneaded in rounds to mimic the sun's cycle. What united these cultures wasn't just the ingredients, but the intentionality behind them. In Egypt, priests broke their dawn fast with onions and garlic, foods scorned by the elite for their pungency but revered as sources of strength. Workers building the pyramids received daily rations of beer, rich in vitamins from fermented grains, turning a morning drink into a tool of endurance. Even the humblest meals were threads in a larger tapestry. The Chinese concept of fan and kai, staple grains paired with vegetables, wasn't just about balance on the plate. It reflected the harmony of yin and yang, a daily edible meditation. These ancient breakfasts reveal a truth we've forgotten. Food was never just fuel. It was a language of geography, a testament to human ingenuity, and a ritual that turned sustenance into ceremony. When a Roman dipped bread in wine or an Inca elder blessed a bowl of quinoa, they weren't just eating. They were remembering who they were. The concept of fresh breath and clean teeth might feel like a modern obsession, but ancient civilizations were mastering oral hygiene thousands of years before minty toothpaste and electric toothbrushes. In Egypt, where the desert sands could wear down even the strongest teeth, people crafted tooth powders from some truly unexpected ingredients: burnt eggshells, crushed ox hooves, and even powdered ashes mixed with myrrh. These weren't just random mixtures, they were carefully formulated abrasives designed to scrub away plaque while freshening breath. Archaeologists have found mummies with remarkably healthy teeth, proving these powders did more than just mask odors, they worked. Meanwhile, the Romans took dental care to another level with a surprising ingredient: urine. Specifically, Portuguese urine, imported in bulk and prized for its ammonia content, which acted as a natural bleaching agent. Wealthy Romans would swish it around their mouths to whiten teeth and kill bacteria, a practice so popular that Emperor Nero levied a tax on urine shipments. While the idea might make us cringe today, the science behind it holds up. Ammonia is still used in some modern cleaning products for its disinfecting power. But perhaps the most enduring innovation came from ancient China, where chew sticks, twigs from aromatic trees like neem or willow, were frayed at one end to create a natural toothbrush. Users would rub the fibrous ends against their teeth, releasing antimicrobial compounds that prevented gum disease. These early toothbrushes were so effective that travelers along the Silk Road carried them west, eventually inspiring the bristle brushes of medieval Europe. What's fascinating is how these methods weren't just functional, they were deeply tied to cultural beliefs. The Egyptians saw clean teeth as a sign of divine favor, while Ayurvedic texts from India prescribed neem twigs for balancing bodily humors. Even the Mayans used crushed bones and salt to polish their teeth, sometimes inlaying them with jade as a status symbol. Today, we might laugh at urine mouthwash or ox hoof powder, but modern dentistry still relies on the same principles: abrasion, antibacterial agents, and mechanical cleaning. The next time you brush your teeth, remember, you're continuing a ritual as old as civilization itself, one that connects you to ancestors who valued a bright smile just as much as we do. In the dusty glare of an Egyptian sunrise, the banks of the Nile hummed with motion, not with honking cars or crowded subways, but with the steady rhythm of sandaled feet and the braying of donkeys. For most Egyptians, travel wasn't about speed, it was about endurance and necessity. Farmers hauled bundles of papyrus and baskets of grain along dirt paths, their donkeys loaded with goods bound for market. Wealthier officials might ride in chariots along the river's edge, but even pharaohs understood the Nile was the true highway. Flat-bottomed boats carried everything from limestone blocks for pyramids to jars of beer for workers, gliding with the current northward and hoisting sails for the return south. This wasn't just travel, it was a dance with the river's moods, timed to the annual floods that dictated life itself. Halfway across the ancient world, Rome's streets told a different story. Imagine stepping into the Forum at dawn, where the clatter of iron-rimmed wheels on stone echoed off marble colonnades. Senators and merchants jostled for space in a city so congested that Julius Caesar banned wheeled traffic during daylight hours, an ancient version of rush hour gridlock. Those who could afford it traveled by lectica, a curtained litter carried by slaves, weaving through alleys too narrow for carts. The wealthy reclined on cushions, peering out at the chaos while staying above it, literally. Meanwhile, messengers and laborers darted through back streets, their sandals slapping against the city's famed cobbles, part of a network so advanced that some roads still exist today. But long before Rome laid its first stone path, Mesopotamia had already revolutionized travel with the world's earliest paved roads. These weren't mere dirt tracks but engineered marvels, layers of crushed limestone and bitumen, baked hard under the sun to withstand the weight of ox-drawn carts. Along these roads, merchants transported lapis lazuli from Afghanistan and cedar from Lebanon, their wheels leaving grooves still visible in excavated ruins. Unlike Egypt's intimate reliance on the Nile or Rome's urban frenzy, Mesopotamian roads were about empire building, threads stitching together the first great cities from Ur to Babylon. Yet beyond these grand infrastructures, rural travel remained a test of grit. a shepherd guiding flocks across Anatolian highlands or a Maya trader hauling cacao through dense rainforest faced challenges no paved road could solve. For them, travel meant reading the land like a map, knowing which mountain passes stayed open in winter, which rivers could be forded in drought. The contrast couldn't be starker. Urban commuters counting steps on stone-paved streets, while villagers measured journeys by sunsets and blistered feet. What's striking is how these ancient systems mirror our own dilemmas: traffic jams, infrastructure decay, the eternal trade-off between speed and cost. The Roman who hired a lectica to avoid street noise isn't so different from today's commuter booking a ride share to bypass the subway. And when we curse potholes on modern highways, we echo the complaints of Mesopotamian cart drivers, their wheels rattling over cracked bitumen 3,000 years ago. The roads change, but the journey, that's timeless. In the Fertile Crescent of ancient Babylon, the rhythm of work wasn't set by clocks but by water specifically, the life-giving pulse of irrigation canals that turned desert into farmland. Picture a farmer waking not to an alarm but to the sound of sluice gates opening at dawn, signaling his turn to channel Euphrates River water into his family's plot. His day unfolded in precise shifts: 2 hours of hauling silt to reinforce canal walls, followed by tending date palms whose roots needed constant moisture. By midday, when the sun hung brutal overhead, he'd retreat to weave reed baskets, a task reserved for the hottest hours when fieldwork paused. This wasn't just labor, it was a hydraulic ballet, synchronized across thousands of workers under the watch of temple officials who tracked water allotments on clay tablets. The entire system thrived on interdependence. If one farmer neglected his canal maintenance, the entire network suffered. Meanwhile, in classical Athens, the cadence of work pulsed to a different beat. An artisan's day began not with river water but with the cry of market heralds announcing the opening of workshops. A potter might spend his morning throwing clay on the wheel, his apprentices grinding minerals for glaze, while his wife, often the business manager, haggled with traders over prices. Unlike Babylon's seasonal rigidity, Athenian craftsmen followed flexible hours, breaking midday for philosophical debates in the agora or a sweat-scrubbing session at the public bath. Their time was compartmentalized by task, not sun position, firing kilns at cool dawn, painting intricate designs when light was brightest, delivering orders before symposiums began at dusk. The contrast between these systems reveals how deeply work was tied to environment. In Babylon, the agricultural calendar carved the year into unshakable phases. Spring floods meant dredging canals, summer demanded date pollination, a delicate task using palm fibers. Autumn brought harvests celebrated with temple offerings of beer and bread. Miss a phase and starvation loomed. Athens, though reliant on imported grain, operated in a rhythm of craftsmanship. A bronzesmith could cast statues year-round, but his busiest season came before the Panathenaic festival, when athletes needed victory trophies. Yet beneath these differences lay a shared genius, the art of balancing collective and individual labor. Babylonian farmers pooled resources to maintain canals, while Athenian artisans formed guilds to standardize wages. Both cultures honored rest. Babylon's Akitu festival shut down all work for 11 days of purification rituals, and Athenian law forbade smithy work during sacred months. Their lesson: productivity wasn't about endless toil, but about aligning work with natural and spiritual cycles. When we groan about modern work-life balance, perhaps we're yearning for something they mastered millennia ago, a life where labor served the earth and the community, not just the bottom line. The air in Carthage's Tophet market hung thick with the scent of crushed coriander and molten glass as merchants from 3 continents jostled for space under striped awnings. A Phoenician trader in indigo-stained robes balanced bronze scales against the weight of Tyrian purple dye, a pigment so precious it was measured in grains of barley. Nearby, a Greek sailor haggled over Tunisian olives, their value calculated not in coins but in amphorae of Sicilian wine. This wasn't just shopping, it was a high-stakes dance of trust and calculation, where a misplaced weight could spark disputes settled by market overseers wielding standard cubit rods. Over in Teotihuacan's Street of the Dead, commerce pulsed to a different rhythm. Obsidian blades changed hands for sacks of cacao beans, a currency so revered that counterfeiters stuffed clay pellets inside bean shells. Merchants from Maya city-states eyed jade pendants priced in lengths of woven quetzal feathers, while local farmers traded maize using a barter system perfected over centuries. What looked like chaos was actually a meticulously ordered economy, with tribute collectors auditing transactions using knotted cords called quippers to track debts. Then came the revolution, the Lydians of Western Asia Minor. Around 600 BC, they began stamping lumps of electrum, a gold-silver alloy, with lion emblems to create the world's first standardized coins. Suddenly, a Sardis merchant could sell wool without hauling sheep to market. A few clinking discs replaced endless negotiations over relative worth, but this convenience came at a cost. Early coins varied wildly in purity, leading savvy traders to test them by biting down gold is softer than adulterated metals or rubbing them on touchstones to reveal their true luster. These systems reveal a fundamental truth about ancient markets. They weren't just places to swap goods, but laboratories of human innovation. Carthage's merchants developed early insurance contracts, pooling funds to compensate traders whose ships sank. The Aztecs used cocoa beans as both currency and ritual offerings, blurring the line between finance and religion. And when Lydia's King Croesus issued the first bimetallic currency, pure gold and silver coins stamped with facing bull heads, he didn't just simplify trade, he created a tool of empire, enabling armies to be paid and taxes to flow across borders. What's astonishing is how these ancient solutions still shape our world. The concept of guaranteed weights, it's why grocery stores have calibrated scales today. The Aztec practice of punishing cocoa bean counterfeiters foreshadowed modern anti-fraud laws, and those first Lydian coins evolved into a system so powerful that when Persia conquered Lydia, they kept the currency, proving that even conquerors recognize the value of a good idea. The next time you tap your credit card, remember, you're part of a chain that stretches back to merchants squinting at electrum under the Mediterranean sun, forever changing how the world measures worth. In the austere mess halls of Sparta, warriors gathered not for gourmet delights but for endurance training dishes like melas zomos, a broth so infamous that visiting Athenians claimed it could only be swallowed by those raised from birth on its brutal simplicity. This wasn't just food, it was a test. The recipe boiled pork fat, vinegar, and blood, thickened with barley, was deliberately unappetizing to outsiders. Spartans believed luxury weakened discipline, so even kings dined on this same crude stew alongside their soldiers, reinforcing equality through shared hardship. Yet hidden beneath its revolting reputation lay shrewd nutrition. Vinegar preserved the broth during campaigns, blood provided iron for stamina, and barley offered slow-burning energy. Every slurp was a lesson in Spartan values, sustenance stripped of pleasure, a reminder that comfort was the enemy of strength. Meanwhile, in the lacquered pavilions of China's Han Dynasty, lunch was an edible canvas of social order. Emperors feasted on delicate wheat noodles floating in bone marrow broths, adorned with slivers of pheasant and rare cloud ear mushrooms, dishes requiring hours of labor by specialized chefs. Just outside the palace gates, merchants enjoyed hand-pulled noodles with simpler toppings like leeks and fermented beans, while farmers ate millet gruel in their fields. The contrast couldn't be starker: Sparta's communal black pot versus China's tiered bowls, where the thickness of your noodles signaled your place in the celestial bureaucracy. Even the act of eating differed: Spartans standing to stay battle-ready, Han aristocrats reclining on cushions as servants presented dishes with poetic names like jade ribbons in golden soup. Half a world away, Aztec laborers building the Templo Mayor took their lunches without ceremony but with equally deliberate design. Workers squatting on sun-baked stones unwrapped tlaxcali thin maize tortillas to scoop up mashed beans or spiced huautli amaranth greens washed down with atole, a cornmeal drink. These meals weren't just portable, they were engineered for mass labor. Maize provided carbohydrates for stamina, beans offered protein, and chili peppers stimulated circulation in high-altitude chill. Unlike Sparta's enforced equality or China's culinary hierarchy, Aztec meal divisions were pragmatic. The Pozteca merchant class might add turkey or avocado, but builders' rations were calibrated precisely to sustain their toil. Archaeologists find traces of these meals still embedded in mortar, where crumbs fell as workers plastered pyramids under the midday sun. What unites these traditions is how lunch transcended nutrition. In Sparta, a single pot fed 500 men to erase class distinctions. In Han China, the emperor's 12-course banquet displayed heaven's mandate through rare ingredients and intricate knife work. And for the Aztecs, maize wasn't just food but sacred flesh of the god Quetzalcoatl, eaten with ritual gratitude. Today, we might pack lunches for convenience, but they once carried the weight of empires, every bite a declaration of who you were, who you served, and what you were willing to endure. The Spartans knew this truth best. Tell me what you eat at noon, and I'll tell you what kind of society built you. When the sun reached its zenith over the Nile, even the most diligent Egyptian laborers would seek refuge under the swaying fronds of date palms. Their midday pause wasn't laziness, it was survival. Workers constructing the pyramids knew what modern science now confirms: cognitive function declines in extreme heat. By resting during the hottest hours, they preserved energy for more precise stone carving when temperatures cooled. These palm-shaded respites were so ingrained that tomb paintings depict supervisors dozing alongside their teams, their measuring rods slack in hand, still calloused from morning labor. Across the Mediterranean, the siesta took on ritual significance in ancient Greece. Physicians like Hippocrates prescribed afternoon rest as medical doctrine, believing the body's black bile, linked to melancholy, grew dominant under the midday sun. Wealthy Athenians retreated to shaded colonnades where slaves fanned them with ostrich plumes, while Spartan soldiers napped in barracks designed with strategically placed windows to funnel cool mountain breezes. The very architecture bent to accommodate this biological necessity. The word siesta itself comes from the Latin hora sexta, meaning the sixth hour, when Romans halted all business from courts to construction sites. But the most sophisticated siesta culture may have flourished in Mesoamerica. The Maya didn't just sleep through the heat, they transformed it into sacred time. Their Wayab calendars marked certain midday hours as empty time, when the veil between worlds thinned. Commoners napped in hammocks strung between ceiba trees, but priests used these hours for divination, interpreting dreams that came more vividly in the humid stillness. Meanwhile, Tenochtitlan's aqueduct engineers scheduled inspections for early morning and late afternoon, avoiding the deceptive shimmer of midday that could mask structural flaws. These traditions weren't coincidental, they were climatic adaptations etched into DNA. Recent studies of the PER3 gene show populations in hot climates often possess variants promoting biphasic sleep. The ancient Minoans of Crete built villas with north-facing sleeping chambers for siestas, while Persian caravanserais featured underground qanat-cooled rooms where travelers could escape the solar onslaught. Even animals followed these rhythms. Egyptian texts describe donkeys refusing to pull loads between noon and mid-afternoon, their instincts overriding human demands. Modern sleep science now validates what these cultures understood intuitively. Segmented sleep aligns with our circadian biology. NASA studies found pilots who took 26-minute siestas improved alertness by 54%. A fact Phoenician sailors likely knew when they lashed canvas shades between masts for crew rotations. The next time you feel that mid-afternoon slump, remember, it's not weakness. It's your body whispering an ancient truth, one that built pyramids and empires in the intervals between sunlight and shade. On the dusty training grounds of Olympia, Greek athletes prepared under a brutal regimen that would make modern gym-goers shudder. Their workouts began before dawn, not with warm-up stretches, but by slathering their bodies in olive oil mixed with sand to create resistance against the elements. A typical session might include sprinting across the stadium track while carrying bronze weights shaped like cattle, their muscles burning under the Mediterranean sun. But the real challenge came in the palestra, where wrestlers practiced holds on stone dummies coated in wax to simulate sweaty opponents. Trainers monitored every movement, enforcing rules like holding one's breath during lifts, a technique believed to concentrate vital pneuma life force in the muscles. These weren't arbitrary tortures, they were precision-engineered routines, refined over centuries to produce bodies capable of hurling discusses over 30 meters or surviving the savage pancration, a no-holds-barred combat sport where only eye-gouging and biting were forbidden. Meanwhile, in the vast pastures of Persia, young nobles learned warfare through what we'd now call cross-training archery drills performed at full gallop, spear throws from horseback, and endurance races across mountain trails. Their secret weapon, the char-aina, a 4-exercise sequence mimicking mounted combat, drawing bows while lying supine to strengthen backs for long rides, rotating with weighted poles to build torso flexibility for sword swings, and high knee runs through sand pits to condition legs for gripping horses. Unlike the Greeks' focus on individual glory, Persian training emphasized unit cohesion. Riders practiced passing water skins between galloping horses, a skill that later saved armies crossing deserts. Rome's gladiator schools took physical preparation to industrial levels. A Lannister trainer might put recruits through weighted ladder climbs using wooden frames studded with iron rungs, simulating assaults on fortress walls. Daily menus were calibrated like modern athlete diets: barley for endurance, beans for muscle repair, and ash-infused tonics to strengthen bones. But the most revealing contrast lies in their recovery methods. Defeated gladiators received premium medical care, including massages with St. John's wort oil to reduce inflammation, while victorious legionaries marched 20 miles with 60-pound packs the next day. Rome understood that different warriors needed different regimens. Yet for every Olympian or gladiator, there were thousands of unnamed peasants whose workouts came from dawn to dusk labor. Egyptian farmers developed tremendous grip strength hauling water buckets via shadoof levers, their forearms growing thicker than many athletes. Chinese rice cultivators squatted for hours transplanting seedlings, a posture modern fitness coaches now tout as the Asian squat for hip flexibility. Even the act of grinding grain on rotary querns built rotator cuff stability that would impress today's physiotherapists. What separated these approaches wasn't just intensity but intention. The Greek athlete trained to embody arete excellence, the Persian rider to become one with his horse, the gladiator to survive another day in the arena. The peasant's body, shaped by necessity, bore testament to humanity's oldest fitness program, survival itself. Their calloused hands and sun-baked backs achieved what no gym membership can replicate: a physique forged in the furnace of daily life, where every motion served a purpose beyond vanity. When we foam roll after spin class, we're participating in a tradition far older than dumbbells or treadmills, the eternal human dance between exertion and adaptation. Beneath the soaring arches of Rome's baths of Caracalla, the act of bathing transformed into something far grander than mere cleanliness. It became the heartbeat of an empire. Picture this: a senator striding through marble halls, his skin glistening from a scrape with a strigil, that curved bronze tool athletes used to slough off oil and grime. But this wasn't just personal grooming, it was performance art. The baths were where deals were brokered over steam rooms, where poets recited verses between plunges into frigid pools, and where even emperors might rub shoulders with merchants provided they'd paid the entry fee. The ritual was meticulous. First the tepidarium to open pores, then the scalding coldarium to sweat out impurities, finally the icy frigidarium to jolt the body into alertness. And everywhere, attendants with vials of scented oils rose for relaxation, mint for invigoration turned hygiene into a sensory experience. Archaeologists have found drain pipes clogged with olive oil and perfume residues, silent witnesses to a culture that believed cleanliness wasn't just next to godliness, it was godliness, with the baths themselves dedicated to deities like Minerva, patroness of wisdom and strategic warfare. Half a world away, Japan's onsen traditions wove hygiene into the fabric of spirituality. Natural hot springs, heated by volcanic forces, were revered as gifts from the kami, spirits of the earth. Unlike Rome's opulent thermae, onsen bathing was and remains a study in minimalist reverence. Bathers rinsed thoroughly before entering, purifying body and mind in silence broken only by the trickle of spring water. The minerals sulfur for skin ailments, iron for vitality, were believed to carry the land's sacred energy. Samurai soaked here before battles, farmers after harvests, and couples in Konyo-ku mixed gender baths to pray for fertility. Even today, the wooden buckets and stone basins of historic onsen echo an unbroken ritual, not just washing but communing with nature itself. Meanwhile, in the jungles of Mesoamerica, the Maya elevated sweating to a cosmic act. Their Temazcal sweat lodges low stone domes heated with volcanic rocks were portals to the spirit world. A shaman would pour herbal infusions over the stones, releasing steam scented with copal resin while chanting prayers to Ixchel, the jaguar goddess of healing. Participants crawled in naked, symbolizing rebirth, and emerged renewed as serpents shedding skin. As one colonial chronicle described it, but this was no casual spa day. The Temazcal's searing heat mirrored the Maya creation myth where gods forged humanity in fire. Modern science confirms its benefits. Deep sweating detoxifies heavy metals, and the ritual's controlled breathing reduces cortisol. But for the Maya, it was always about more than physiology. To sweat was to pray. These traditions reveal a universal truth. Across civilizations, water and steam were never just about removing dirt. The Roman who scraped his skin with a strigil was performing a civic duty. The Japanese bather soaking in an onsen was honoring the land spirit, and the Maya elder chanting in the Temazcal was dialoguing with ancestors. Their rituals whisper a question we've forgotten. When did hygiene stop being sacred? Perhaps it's time to reclaim that wisdom, to turn our daily showers from routine into ritual, and remember that every drop of water carries echoes of divine connection. The shimmering white linen of an Egyptian priest's robe didn't stay pristine by accident. It was a masterpiece of solar engineering. On the banks of the Nile, servants would spread freshly woven fabric across limestone slabs, soaking it in a mixture of natron and water before the relentless sun worked its magic. Ultraviolet rays combined with the alkaline salt not only bleached stains but also sterilized the cloth, a process so effective that modern experiments show it kills bacteria as well as industrial bleach. But the real genius lay in the folds. Workers meticulously pleated garments while damp, letting them dry into crisp ridges that resisted dirt by minimizing surface contact. These weren't just laundry tricks, they were acts of sacred preservation, ensuring the pure white demanded by temple ceremonies and the afterlife's judgment halls. Meanwhile, in the bustling phalanarchy of Rome, cleanliness came from a far less glamorous source: human urine. Walk into a Pompeian fuller's workshop, and you'd find vats of collected urine fermenting near vinegar barrels. This ammonia-rich liquid served as ancient detergent, breaking down oils in wool tunics when combined with fuller's earth, a clay that absorbed grime like modern baking soda. Workers stomped garments in these vats like grapes, then rinsed them in series of tanks culminating in a final soak with sulfur to brighten colors. The smell must have been overwhelming, but the results were undeniable. A toga could go from dingy to dazzling in hours. And here's the twist. Urine was so valuable that emperors taxed its collection, turning public urinals into revenue streams. Today's eco-conscious laundry stripping trends. They're rediscovering what Romans knew: sometimes the most potent cleaners hide in plain sight. High in the Andes, the solution to dirty clothes wasn't scrubbing but spinning. Quechua weavers crafted robes from alpaca wool containing microscopic scales that repelled water and dirt, a self-cleaning feature modern scientists call the lotus effect. When mist settled on garments at dawn, droplets rolled off like mercury, carrying dust with them. For deeper cleaning, they brushed wool with quilqui, a chalky clay that lifted oils without water, then aired it over smoky fires infused with Munya mint to deter moths. Their dyeing techniques were equally ingenious. Rather than submerging fabric, they painted colors onto yarn using copper-tipped tools, creating fade-resistant patterns that survived centuries in tombs. From Phoenician vats of rotting murex snails, a stinking process that yielded Tyrian purple's legendary hue, to Indian dyers fermenting indigo in honey-sweetened vats for deeper blues, ancient textile care was alchemy disguised as housework. The next time you toss a shirt in the washer, remember, you're walking a path first laid by fullers stomping urine-soaked wool, Andean weavers spinning dirt-defying fleece, and Egyptian sun priests who understood that true cleanliness wasn't just removal, it was transformation. The obelisk at Heliopolis didn't just cast a shadow, it wove time itself into the fabric of Egyptian life. As sunlight slid across these towering monuments, priests marked the day's progress not in hours but in sacred increments called WWT, each corresponding to the length of the shadow at specific solar positions. Farmers planting barley along the Nile didn't need sundials. They read time in the slant of their own bodies' shadows, a living clock synchronized with the gods' journey across the sky. But precision demanded innovation. By the New Kingdom, portable shadow clocks carved from wood appeared, their L-shaped design dividing daylight into 12 parts regardless of the season. These weren't mere gadgets, they orchestrated temple rituals so precisely that offerings to Ra coincided exactly with the shadow touching certain glyphs, turning timekeeping into an act of worship. Meanwhile, in the courtyards of China's Han Dynasty, water dripped with mathematical purpose. Clepsydra's intricate bronze vessels with graded markings and regulated outflow measured not just hours but the fleeting key, intervals of 14 minutes and 24 seconds crucial for scheduling imperial audiences. An attendant would refill the master clock's chamber at dawn, adjusting the water flow seasonally to account for viscosity changes in winter. But the true marvel lay in the Song dynasty's mechanical escalation. By the 11th century, engineer Su Song's astronomical clock tower used a water-wheel escapement to power rotating armillary spheres and chiming drums, an innovation so advanced it wouldn't be matched in Europe for 400 years. Beneath the vast Pacific skies, Polynesian navigators decoded time in ways that defied terrestrial tools. Steering double-hulled canoes across thousands of miles, they tracked the sun's azimuth against coral compasses etched with 32 directional teeth, while memorizing star paths like the Hawaiian Kealaukahoku, the road of the stars that rose and set at specific seasonal hours. Their genius, using the ocean itself as a clock, wave patterns changed predictably with lunar phases, and the color depth of twilight indicated how far they'd traveled east or west. When clouds obscured the sky, they timed their paddle strokes to the swell's rhythm, creating a nautical metronome that kept entire fleets synchronized. These systems did more than mark minutes, they shaped civilizations. India's Vedic Sandhya prayers were timed to the muhurta, a unit of 48 minutes derived from the sun's movement across 30 nakshatra's lunar mansions. Miss your window, and the ritual's potency was believed to vanish like morning dew. In contrast, Babylonian water clocks regulated the dana, a 30-minute interval dictating when merchants could open stalls or when astrologers should read omens. The Maya took it further, calibrating their 260-day Teotihuacan calendar with zenith passages, moments when the sun cast no shadow at noon, signaling sacred days for planting or warfare. What unites these methods is their reverence for time's fluidity. Unlike our rigid digital displays, ancient clocks breathed with nature. The Egyptians' shadows lengthened in winter, Chinese water clocks slowed in cold weather, Polynesian star paths shifted across seasons. Yet this apparent variability held deeper accuracy. By binding time to environmental cues, they created systems that adapted rather than dictated. When we rush through minutes sliced by atomic clocks, we've lost something fundamental: the understanding that time isn't just something we measure, but something we inhabit, as inseparable from our lives as the Nile's floods were to the farmer or the stars to the navigator. As dusk settled over Rome's Palatine Hill, the scene transformed dining into a theatrical spectacle where power and pleasure collided. Reclining on ivory couches, patricians feasted on dormice glazed in honey, peacocks stuffed with thrush meat, and pyramids of fruit arranged to resemble mythical beasts. Silver platters piled with sea urchins and garum fermented fish sauce circulated between courses, each dish a calculated display of wealth. Imported figs from Carthage signaled political alliances, while flamingo tongues hinted at imperial favor. Yet beneath the extravagance lay meticulous social choreography. A guest's seating position left or right of the host conveyed their status, and using one's own knife instead of the provided silver blade was a shocking faux pas. Even drunkenness had rules. Vomiting between courses into specially provided vessels was tolerated, but spilling wine during a toast to the emperor could mean exile. Half a world away, Viking chieftains presided over a very different kind of feast. In smoke-filled longhouses, warriors clustered around fire pits on wooden benches, tearing into joints of salt-cured boar with personal Sikh's knives. The meal was communal in every sense. Hunks of rye bread served as edible plates, soaked through with fatty broth, while a single drinking horn circulated hand to hand. Passing it without sipping was unthinkable. Refusing mead meant distrusting the brewer's honor. Unlike Rome's hierarchical seating, Viking halls placed youth at the edges to serve elders, their portions determined by that day's battlefield contributions. A warrior who'd slain an enemy might receive the choicest cut of meat, while boys earned their place by reciting sagas between bites. Archaeologists find these scenes frozen in time, charred bones still bearing knife marks, buried alongside horns ringed with runes invoking Odin's protection. Meanwhile, in the candlelit courts of China's Zhou dynasty, chopsticks weren't just tools but extensions of Confucian virtue. Made of bronze or lacquered bamboo, their blunt ends symbolized peace, a pointed contrast to daggers used by nomadic neighbors. Etiquette manuals prescribed holding them 2/3 from the top for balance, never pointing them like weapons or spearing food, a gesture reserved for funeral rites. A noble's meal might feature 12 precisely arranged dishes, but the true test came in handling slippery foods like tofu or lotus roots without dropping them, a sign of self-control. Even the placement of chopsticks carried meaning. Laying them parallel signaled contentment, while crossing them implied dispute. What united these traditions was the liquid alchemy of fermentation. Roman mulsum, honeyed wine infused with saffron, lubricated political negotiations, while Viking bjor, a hybrid of barley beer and juniper berries, flowed freely during oath-swearing ceremonies. In China, heated rice wine served in ritual dew vessels cemented alliances, its warmth echoing the harmony ideal. Modern studies reveal the science behind these practices. Ethanol boosts oxytocin, the trust hormone, explaining why deals sealed over drinks felt binding. The contrast between these evening rituals reveals a universal truth. Supper was never just about sustenance. Whether reclining on Roman couches or passing a Viking mead horn, humans have always known that food tastes different when shared, not just with companions but with the weight of tradition. The next time you set the table, consider what your plates and glasses might say about you centuries from now. As Athenian philosophers debated metaphysics deep into the night, their words flickered to life in the glow of terracotta oil lamps, simple vessels that revolutionized human productivity. These weren't mere containers but marvels of Mediterranean engineering, their twisted linen wicks floating in pools of first-press olive oil, burning clean and bright for hours. The secret lay in the spouted design. A narrow channel regulated oil flow like a carburetor, preventing wasteful flare-ups while casting enough light to read papyrus scrolls by. But even these lamps came with risks. Slaves were tasked with trimming wicks to avoid smoke stains on frescoed walls, and households kept damp sponges handy to smother accidental fires. The wealthiest Athenians boasted lamps shaped like gods or beasts, their spouts artfully disguised as dolphins' mouths or Hermes' winged sandals, turning necessity into status symbols. Far from the Mediterranean's olive groves, the Inuit carved illumination from the very animals that sustained them. In snow-block igloos, shallow soapstone dishes filled with rendered seal fat burned with a steady, greasy light, their wicks made from dried moss or twisted sinew. Unlike Athenian lamps, these Arctic candles served dual purposes. Their warmth prevented caribou tallow from freezing, while the flicker repelled the oppressive darkness of polar winters. But efficiency was paramount. A single candle might burn for 12 hours if the wick was carefully tended, and families huddled close to maximize both light and heat. Archaeologists find these soapstone lamps in ruins with soot-blackened ceilings, silent witnesses to generations who literally lived by the seal's fat. The Han dynasty took nocturnal brilliance to another level entirely. Their everlasting lamps, discovered in elite tombs, burned with eerie persistence thanks to wicks woven from asbestos fibers, a mineral the Chinese called fireproof cloth. These wicks, resistant to both flames and arsenic fumes from alloyed bronze oil reservoirs, could theoretically burn indefinitely if replenished. Court records describe palace corridors lit by hundreds of such lamps, their flames reflecting off polished bronze mirrors to amplify the glow. But this innovation wasn't without peril. Tomb robbers occasionally suffocated in sealed chambers where arsenic-laden vapors accumulated over centuries. What united these traditions was their defiance of nature's rhythms. An Athenian playwright could rewrite scripts by lamplight. An Inuit elder could carve intricate ivory tools long after sunset, and a Han bureaucrat could audit tax records deep into the hour of the rat. The fire risk was ever present. Rome's infamous Great Fire likely started from an overturned oil lamp, but the reward was stolen time. When we flick a light switch today, we're heirs to this ancient gamble, trading safety for the precious gift of hours once claimed by darkness. The Spartan boy taken from his mother at age 7 didn't cry, not because he was brave, but because his tears would earn him a beating from the paidonomos, the state-appointed disciplinarian overseeing the Agoj training system. This wasn't just boot camp, it was a calculated stripping of identity. Boys slept on reed mats they'd gathered themselves from the Eurotas River, their only blankets the calluses earned from wrestling in icy mud. Meals were deliberately meager to teach stealth. Stealing food was allowed, but getting caught meant floggings. Yet the true genius of Spartan childrearing lay in its communal aspect. Older boys mentored younger ones, creating chains of loyalty that bound generations. When a 12-year-old stole a fox pup to raise in secret and let it gnaw through his stomach rather than confess, a story later immortalized by Plutarch, he wasn't just proving his toughness. He was embodying Sparta's core belief. The collective mattered more than the individual, even in death. Half a world away, Confucian scholars in China's Zhou dynasty taught morality through riddles woven into everyday objects. A father might place a crooked arrow on his son's study desk, prompting the boy to ponder the classic of filial piety until he grasped the metaphor. Just as straightening the arrow required heat and pressure, so too did moral character demand cultivation. Children memorized the three-character classic not through rote repetition, but by tracing characters in rice trays, each stroke reinforcing virtues like respect for elders. The brilliance of this system, it turned homes into classrooms. A mother serving tea became a lesson in humility when she poured for her husband first. Sweeping the courtyard taught diligence when framed as honoring the ancestors' domain. Even toys carried weight. Lacquer puzzles shaped like mountain ranges symbolized life's obstacles, their pieces only fitting together through patient effort. In Tenochtitlan's Comicac schools, Aztec children learned ethics through Teotihuacan, flower songs that wove delicate metaphors around hard truth. A teacher might chant about hummingbirds sipping nectar to illustrate how wisdom gathered drop by drop, or compare a warrior's spear to a blooming agave, both requiring years of nurturing before bearing fruit. These weren't nursery rhymes but mnemonic devices, encoding complex philosophies in imagery drawn from the natural world adolescent boys studied. Meanwhile, girls practiced spinning thread while reciting verses linking the spindle's twist to life's cyclical nature. Archaeologists find ceramic figurines buried alongside children, not mere playthings but ritual objects, like the Teotihuacan dolls that taught constellations through their star-patterned clay bodies. Beneath these cultural differences lay universal practices biology dictated. From the banks of the Nile to Celtic hill forts, parents swaddled infants in linen or wool strips, not just to calm them but to ensure limbs grew straight, a practice modern orthopedics confirms aids hip development. Egyptian tombs reveal wooden pull toys with hippopotami heads, their hinged jaws clacking as toddlers dragged them, while Etruscan rattles filled with pebbles stimulated auditory development. The common thread, play as purposeful preparation. A Viking child's carved wooden sword wasn't just a toy, it was the first step toward understanding balance and grip. The Athenian girl's doll with movable limbs prefigured her future role weaving clothing for real bodies. These traditions reveal a profound truth. Childhood was never seen as mere prelude to adulthood, but as the crucible where civilization's values were forged. When a Spartan boy endured hunger or a Confucian scholar traced characters in rice, they weren't just learning skills, they were becoming living vessels for their culture's survival. The toys, songs, and swaddling clothes weren't incidental. They were the first threads in the tapestry of human continuity, woven one lesson at a time. In the golden light of a Theban afternoon, an Egyptian artist painting a tomb mural would pause to dip his brush not just to honor the pharaoh, but to avoid disturbing the cat dozing on his pallet. These weren't mere pets, they were living incarnations of Bastet, the lioness-turned, domestic goddess whose cult stretched from the Nile Delta to Nubia. When a cat died, households shaved their eyebrows in mourning and mummified the beloved creature with linen bandages soaked in sacred oils, its tiny bronze amulets depicting mice to ensure eternal hunting in the afterlife. But this reverence was practical too. Cats kept granaries rat-free, their lethal efficiency so valued that exporting them carried a death penalty. Archaeologists find their tiny skeletons curled beside human remains, proving companionship transcended even the grave. Rome took a different approach to animal worship, not deification but designer breeding. The sleek greyhounds pacing mosaic-floored villas weren't just status symbols, they represented centuries of eugenics. Roman fanciers crossed African gazehounds with Celtic hunting dogs to create the Vertragus, a strain so fast it could outrun hares without weapons. Wealthy matrons dressed these dogs in jeweled collars, but legionaries relied on their sharp senses to guard camps and track fleeing enemies. The poet Gratius even penned verses praising their chest deep as a war galley's prow and legs like Apollo's arrows, yet the true testament to their value. Greyhound theft was one of the few crimes punished by public execution. Halfway across the world, the Song dynasty turned pest control into high art. Imperial gardens teemed with singing crickets, their melodies believed to channel the harmonies of the universe. But the Emperor Huizong elevated them further. he commissioned miniature jade arenas where champion crickets dueled, their fights scored like operas. Trainers fed them ground lotus root and honey, massaged their wings with hair bristle brushes, and housed them in carved gourds lined with fragrant herbs. A champion cricket could earn its owner a governor's ransom, yet their real value lay in their role as living barometers. Farmers listened for changes in their chirps to predict storms. For sheer practicality, few matched the Persian cheetah's hunting prowess. Kings kept curated packs, their eyes hooded with silk until prey was sighted, then released like feathered arrows. What's astonishing is the training. Handlers used Arab horses as mobile platforms, teaching cheetahs to leap from saddles at full gallop. The Mughal Emperor Akbar reportedly maintained 1,000, their collars studded with emeralds to ward off the evil eye. Meanwhile, Minoan ferrets performed humbler duties, threading through palace storerooms to flush out rats, their sleek bodies fitted with tiny leather muzzles to prevent egg theft. These relationships reveal a truth modern pet owners might recognize. Whether worshipped as gods, bred as athletes, or employed as pest controllers, animals have always been more than tools. They're mirrors reflecting our values: the Egyptians' spiritual connection, the Romans' obsession with perfection, the Song emperor's appreciation of beauty in miniature. When we scratch our dog's ears or fill a cat's bowl today, we're continuing dialogues that began in granaries and palaces millennia ago, proving some bonds transcend species, era, and even death itself. A Maya noble reclining in his palace wouldn't just flash a smile, he'd reveal a masterpiece. Skilled artisans drilled tiny holes into living teeth, then cemented jade, turquoise, or even iron pyrite inlays with a resin stronger than modern dental adhesives. These weren't mere decorations, they were cosmic maps. Jade symbolized the maize god's eternal renewal, while hematite mirrored the blood of sacrifice. The procedure, performed without anesthesia using bow-driven drills, was so precise that many inlays survived centuries in archaeological digs. But the real shock. These early dentists understood biomechanics, placing inlays along stress lines to reinforce teeth rather than weaken them, a principle modern dentistry only rediscovered in the 20th century. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Celtic warriors transformed their hair into weapons of psychological warfare. Before battle, they slaked lime powder in water, then combed the paste through their locks until it hardened into stiff, ghost-white spikes. The effect was terrifying. Imagine facing an army whose hair gleamed like bone under the moonlight, their movements releasing clouds of caustic dust. But this wasn't just intimidation. The lime's high pH killed lice and sealed hair shafts against moisture, proving practicality and pageantry could coexist. Roman historians like Diodorus Siculus described these warriors as demonic apparitions, their hair standing rigid as boar bristles, a testament to a grooming ritual that blurred the line between beauty and battlefield utility. In the scented gardens of Mughal emperors, beards became olfactory art. Barbers trained in the khidmat tradition would spend hours kneading rose otto and sandalwood oils into facial hair, then wrap it in silk infused with musk to set the fragrance. The Grand Vizier's Dargah employed a special perfumer of beards who blended attars based on seasons, cooling vetiver for summer, warming amber for winter. Court manuals prescribed specific scents for occasions, saffron-infused blends for weddings, myrrh-heavy mixes for funerals. What began as hygiene, these oils prevented skin infections, evolved into a sensory language. A man's aroma conveyed his sophistication before he uttered a word. Hairstyles etched social hierarchies into flesh. Assyrian kings wore tiered curls so elaborate that sculptors rendered each ringlet individually in stone, their symmetry symbolizing divine order. Maori Tiki warriors bound their hair into top knots called tiki, each layer representing a conquered enemy, while Norse thralls were forbidden to cut theirs, their tangled locks broadcasting low status. In Edo, Japan, samurai shaved their pates to prevent helmet slippage, turning necessity into a badge of honor. and Scythian women wove gold threads through braids so finely that archaeologists initially mistook them for jewelry. These practices reveal a universal truth: the body was humanity's first canvas. Whether drilling gems into teeth or scenting beards with roses, our ancestors understood that grooming was never just about cleanliness. It was a tactile manifesto, proclaiming allegiance, power, and belief with every comb stroke and perfume drop. In a world without business cards or social media profiles, hair and teeth became living resumes, etched with the only language everyone could read. Along the Nile's fertile banks, Egyptian women transformed flax into linen with a precision that bordered on alchemy. Harvested just as the plant's blue flowers faded, the fibrous stalks were soaked in the river's warm waters, a process called retting, where bacteria broke down sticky pectins. After days of submersion, workers beat the stalks with wooden mallets, separating golden fibers so fine they were measured in units called kites, each strand thinner than a human hair. Skilled spinners drew these fibers across thigh-wet stones to align them, then twisted them into thread using drop spindles weighted with disc-shaped whorls. The result, linen so sheer it was dubbed woven air, yet so strong it could last millennia, as proven by burial shrouds still intact after 5,000 years. But this wasn't just craft, it was cosmology. Temple texts describe the goddess Isis teaching mortals to weave, linking each twist of the spindle to the cyclical rebirth of the sun god Ra. Meanwhile, in the mulberry groves of ancient China, silk production began with a secret so closely guarded that revealing it carried a death penalty. Farmers cultivated silkworms in woven trays, feeding them fresh leaves every few hours as the larvae spun cocoons from a single unbroken filament up to 900 meters long. The real magic happened in the reeling rooms, where women submerged cocoons in hot water to loosen the sericin gum, then skillfully caught the end of the filament on a bamboo wheel. Turning the wheel required rhythmic precision. Too fast and the thread snapped, too slow and it tangled. Finished threads were plied together, sometimes up to 50 strands thick for imperial brocades. The entire process, from worm to loom, was considered so inherently feminine that Chinese idioms equated a woman's virtues with silk's qualities: resilient yet yielding, lustrous but never ostentatious. High in the Andes, Quechua weavers practiced a ritual as old as their terraced fields, kneeling before backstrap looms, a simple but ingenious device anchored around the hips and tied to a tree. Women wove stories into cloth, their bodies becoming the tension mechanism. Each pass of the heddle stick created patterns encoding myths: zigzags for lightning, diamond shapes for maize fields, step designs echoing mountain peaks. The act was deeply communal. Girls learned by weaving narrow bands called awayu first, their fingers memorizing motifs passed down since the time of Machu Picchu. Unlike Egyptian flax or Chinese silk, Andean textiles used camelid wool from alpacas and vicuñas, spun so tightly it repelled rain like a duck's feathers. Spanish chroniclers noted with awe that Inca cloth could keep water out for days, a marvel they attributed to sorcery but owed entirely to generations of perfected technique. What united these traditions was their inseparable link to womanhood. Greek myths portrayed the fates as spinners measuring mortal lives with thread. Norse sagas described Valkyries weaving battle outcomes on ghastly looms strung with human guts. Even the tools carried gendered symbolism. Spindle whorls across Europe and Asia were often buried with women, their carved spiral decorations mirroring the cyclical nature of birth and rebirth. The connection ran so deep that when Industrial Revolution factories appropriated spinning, feminists reclaimed the distaff as a symbol of female labor's forgotten dignity. From the linen-clad priestesses of Thebes to the silk-weaving concubines of Chang'an, threads didn't just clothe bodies, they spun the very fabric of cultural identity, one meticulous twist at a time. Beneath the towering walls of Mycenae, artisans worked a miracle with their hands, transforming limestone into a gleaming veneer strong enough to weather 30 centuries. The secret lay in their plaster recipe, a blend of slaked lime, water, and marble dust pounded with wooden pestles until it reached the consistency of thick cream. Applied in layers over rubble walls, this plaster wasn't just decorative. Its chemical makeup caused it to harden through carbonation, absorbing atmospheric CO2 to form a surface harder than the stone beneath. Archaeologists still marvel at how some sections remain intact, their pale sheen defying millennia of Mediterranean sun and rain. But the real genius emerged in their additives: crushed seashells for extra calcium, beeswax for water resistance, and even traces of ox blood, whose albumin acted as a natural binder. This wasn't just home improvement, it was proto-chemistry, turning humble materials into a shield against time. Far to the north, Viking longhouses wore living crowns, roofs that breathed and grew. Builders layered sod over birch bark waterproofing, stacking grassy turfs like shingles with their roots still intertwined. The result, a roof that insulated like modern fiberglass, its tangled root systems trapping air pockets to block Arctic winds while the dense earth absorbed rain like a sponge. In winter, the frozen turf became an extra barrier against storms. In summer, wildflowers bloomed across the rooftops, their roots preventing soil erosion. Smoke from the central hearth seeped slowly through this living ceiling, curing the turf like smoked meat to repel insects and mold. Today's green roofs with their sedan mats and drainage layers. They're rediscovering what Norse builders knew, that sometimes the best technology is already growing under your feet. Meanwhile, in the meticulously planned cities of the Indus Valley, home maintenance began underground. Their drainage systems, clay pipes fitted together with bitumen seals, ran beneath streets and into homes, carrying wastewater away with gradients so precise they required advanced surveying tools. But the true innovation lay in their cleaning protocol, regularly flushing pipes with a vinegar and salt solution to dissolve mineral buildup, a practice modern plumbers would recognize as an early form of descaling. Householders even used grated citrus rinds to scent these flushes, turning routine maintenance into a sensory experience. For daily upkeep, ancient cultures had tricks that still impress. Roman housewives polished glass windows with vinegar-soaked rags and crushed oyster shells, the acetic acid dissolving grime while the abrasive powder buffed surfaces to clarity. Egyptians hung bundles of mint and rosemary near doorways, their volatile oils deterring ants and flies more effectively than synthetic sprays. Chinese scholars placed charcoal in wooden cabinets to absorb humidity and prevent mildew on silk scrolls, a trick now echoed in modern moisture absorbers. These practices reveal a universal truth. Our ancestors didn't just build shelters, they forged partnerships with materials. Mycenaean plaster married chemistry and artistry, Viking roofs collaborated with living ecosystems, and Indus Valley pipes anticipated municipal engineering. When we struggle with leaky faucets or dusty shelves, we're facing the same challenges they solved with lime and vinegar and turf. The difference, they saw maintenance not as chores but as conversations with the earth, the elements, and the passage of seasons. In the shadow of Babylon's ziggurats, musicians plucked lyre strings made from gut and gold, their melodies echoing across courtyards where laborers paused to listen. These weren't just songs, they were mathematical marvels. Recent reconstructions of Babylonian tuning tablets reveal scales so precise they match modern harmonic theory, with intervals calculated to soothe the mind after a day of grinding labor. The lyre of Ur, unearthed from royal tombs, was strung to produce a haunting pentatonic scale, its soundbox shaped like a bull to channel the animal's sacred power. But music wasn't just for elites. In Sumerian beer halls, workers clapped along to Aluzinu songs, their rhythms mimicking the repetitive motions of brickmaking or weaving, turning exhaustion into collective rhythm. Half a world away, the Olmecs turned sport into spectacle with rubber balls that defied gravity. harvesting latex from sacred Castilla elastica trees. They mixed it with morning glory vine sap to create bouncy spheres weighing up to 8 pounds. Their ball courts weren't just playing fields, they were cosmic maps with stone rings representing celestial portals. Players wore padded belts to deflect the ball using hips and thighs, their movements mirroring the sun's journey across the sky. Losing wasn't just defeat. Some glyphs suggest it meant sacrificial honor, blurring the line between game and ritual. The physics still astonish. These balls could rebound over 15 feet, a testament to chemistry mastered 2,000 years before vulcanized rubber. Meanwhile, in the Tang dynasty's misty mountains, tea competitions elevated leisure into high art. Scholars gathered in bamboo pavilions to pit their brewing skills against one another, judging froth consistency, aroma, and even the sound of boiling water. A perfect roll was called the dragon's murmur. The rules were exacting. Water had to be drawn from moonlit springs, whisked with bamboo tools in precisely 49 strokes. Winners earned jade tokens, but the real prize was proving mastery over chaos, transforming a simple leaf into liquid harmony. This wasn't mere entertainment, it was meditation disguised as competition, a way to balance the rigid hierarchies of court life. From Hawaiian Hianalu wave sliding, where chiefs proved divinity by riding 40-foot swells on wooden planks, to Egyptian senate boards whose pieces mirrored the soul's journey through the underworld, ancient leisure was never escapism, it was rehearsal for life's deeper currents. When a Babylonian lyre player tuned his strings or an Olmec athlete lunged for a rubber ball, they were practicing something we've since forgotten. The art of being fully present, where work and play weren't opposites but partners in the dance of existence. Scrawled across Pompeii's brothel walls, next to explicit frescoes and price lists, archaeologists discovered something unexpected: love spells. Not the flowery verse of poets, but raw, urgent incantations like, "May Secundus burn with desire for Prima as fiercely as this lamp burns." These weren't mere graffiti, they were rituals. Workers pressed coins into the plaster while reciting the words, believing the metal would conduct their longing into the very bones of the city. The spells reveal a startling truth. Even in a society where marriages were often practical alliances, passion simmered beneath the surface. A merchant's daughter might wed for family connections, but her secret scrawls betrayed dreams of a man who'd hold her as the ivy clings to the tree, as one inscription pleads. Meanwhile, high in the Andes, the Inca practiced a radical concept: trial marriages. Young couples entered servanacai, a year-long partnership where they lived together, farmed shared plots, and even reared borrowed llamas as a test of compatibility. If the union thrived, they'd formalize it with a public exchange of sandals. If not, they parted without shame, keeping the livestock as consolation. This system respected a profound insight: love isn't just felt, it's built through shared labor and compromise. Spanish chroniclers were scandalized, dismissing it as temporary concubinage, but modern anthropologists recognize its wisdom. By normalizing separation before children arrived, the Inca likely avoided generations of unhappy households. In the refined courts of Japan's Heian period, romance unfolded through scented paper and ink-stained fingertips. Noblewomen spent hours composing tanka poems, their verses so delicate that the weight of a single misplaced syllable could make or break a suitor's heart. A typical exchange might begin with a man sending a sprig of plum blossom wrapped in paper, dyed the exact shade of dawn too pink, and he seemed desperate, too pale, and he appeared indifferent. The woman's reply, written in one of 12 sanctioned cursive scripts, would hint at her feelings through seasonal metaphors. A reference to frost on autumn grass signaled gentle rejection, while mist clinging to pine branches suggested intrigue. These weren't just love letters, they were high-stakes performances where calligraphy skills and botanical knowledge mattered as much as charm. Compare this to the Celtic tribes, where romantic love clashed with political pragmatism. Irish legends like Diarmuid and Grain celebrated elopements, while legal texts allowed women to divorce abusive husbands and keep their property, a rarity in the ancient world. Yet noble marriages still served as bargaining chips between clans. The tension birthed fascinating compromises. A chieftain might officially wed for alliance, then publicly take a heart companion recognized by bardic songs. These parallel systems acknowledged a truth we still grapple with, that the heart and statecraft often demand different paths. From Pompey's desperate spells to the Inca's trial llamas, these customs reveal a universal dance between structure and desire. What's striking isn't their differences, but their shared honesty about love's complexities. They didn't romanticize passion as flawless or dismiss arranged unions as cold. They simply created space for both, allowing human connection to flourish in its many forms. In the stifling heat of an Egyptian night, sleep wasn't just about rest, it was a tactical maneuver against nature's smallest assassins. Wealthier families rested on raised wooden frames strung with linen nets, elevating themselves not for comfort but survival. Scorpions, snakes, and sand vipers prowled the cool floors, making beds perched on legs as tall as a man's shin the difference between dawn and death. Even children's cradles were suspended like hammocks, swaying above the ground where threats lurked. But the real innovation lay in their headrests carved from cedar or alabaster into curved platforms that cradled the neck. These weren't just early pillows, they kept elaborate wigs intact overnight and allowed air to circulate around the head in the sweltering dark. Archaeologists find them in tombs, placed beside the deceased as if death itself demanded proper spinal alignment. Meanwhile, in the frost-laced longhouses of Scandinavia, Vikings took coziness to existential extremes. Their beds were more like wooden closets, enclosed benches lined with furs, tucked against walls to trap body heat during the endless winter nights. Entire families might share this space, piling together under reindeer hides with heated stones wrapped in wool at their feet. But the true stroke of genius was the bed closet's dual purpose. By day, it stored armor and tools. By night, the residual scent of leather and metal mingled with smoke from the central hearth, creating a sensory lullaby of safety and routine. For sailors, these compact sleeping nooks mirrored shipboard hammocks, training bodies to rest in confined spaces even on solid ground, a habit that likely saved lives during storm-tossed voyages. Across the world in Heian-era Japan, sleep was an art form practiced on tatami mats woven from rush grass. These fragrant, springy surfaces weren't just flooring, they defined living spaces by day before transforming into bedding by night. Layers of futons were rolled out with precision, first the shikabuton for cushioning, then the cakebuton quilt weighted with millet hulls to simulate the comforting pressure now touted in modern anxiety blankets. But the masterstroke was the makura, a pillow so unyielding it seems designed by a masochist. Filled with buckwheat hulls or ceramic beads, these rigid supports kept elaborate hairstyles intact, a practical concern for nobles who spent hours on their coiffures. Some were even hollowed out with sound chambers, amplifying whispers of lovers or the approach of assassins, proof that every aspect of sleep served multiple purposes. The Chinese took pillow innovation to surreal heights with porcelain headrests shaped like mountains, dragons, or even erotic scenes. Glazed in cool celadon or cobalt, these ceramic platforms were cherished for their ability to stay chilled during humid summers. Medical texts claimed they prevented heat evils from rising to the brain, while poets rhapsodized about their smooth touch against flushed cheeks. But perhaps the most startling revelation is how many survived intact, their durability suggesting our ancestors might have prized a good night's posture as much as we do memory foam today. Roman soldiers, by contrast, considered luxury a hindrance. Marching across continents, they slept on straw-filled colcita sacks that doubled as daytime seating. Shared tents meant sleeping head to toe with comrades, a space-saving technique that also fostered camaraderie, the ancient equivalent of college dorm life. Their woolen blankets, treated with lanolin to repel rain, were prototypes of modern waterproof fabrics. Even the humblest peasant's straw pallet had purpose, elevated slightly on wooden slats to avoid dampness, with hollow reeds woven through for airflow. What unites these traditions is their refusal to separate sleep from survival. Whether dodging scorpions in Egypt or conserving heat in Norway, every arrangement solved multiple problems with elegant efficiency. The Egyptian headrest wasn't just a pillow, it was pest control and hairstyle preservation. The Viking bed closet wasn't just warm, it was a storage solution and psychological anchor. When we scroll through mattress reviews today, we're participating in a conversation that began with rush grass and ceramic dragons, the endless human quest to turn necessity into something resembling grace. At the first light of dawn in a Hindu household, the air thickens with the scent of crushed sandalwood and ghee as a devotee prepares their morning puja. Every gesture is deliberate, the ringing of a brass bell to awaken the gods, the careful arrangement of marigold petals around a statue of Lakshmi, the flickering camphor flame that symbolizes the burning away of illusion. This isn't just prayer, it's a multisensory dialogue with the divine, where even the act of sweeping the floor before the ritual becomes a metaphor for clearing mental clutter. Offerings follow a precise sequence: water for purity, honey for sweetness, milk for nourishment, each element a tangible expression of gratitude. Modern science reveals unexpected wisdom here. The rhythmic chanting of mantras lowers cortisol levels, while the circular motion of clockwise offerings aligns with research on the calming effects of repetitive, focused movement. Meanwhile, atop the Templo Mayor in Tenochtitlan, dawn took on a far more visceral significance. Aztec priests ascended the pyramid's blood-slicked steps, obsidian blades in hand, to perform Teotihuacan, the precious liquid offering of their own blood. Drawing stingray spines through their tongues or earlobes, they let crimson droplets fall onto strips of bark paper, which were then burned in ceremonial urns. The rising smoke carried their sacrifices to Huitzilopochtli, the sun god who required nourishment to continue his daily battle against darkness. What seems like brutal fanaticism to modern eyes was in fact a meticulously calculated exchange. The Aztecs believed the universe operated on a principle of energy debt. Just as maize needed rain to grow, the gods needed human vitality to sustain cosmic order. Recent archaeological discoveries show these rituals were timed to celestial events. Priests used star alignments to determine the optimal moments for maximum spiritual efficacy. In the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, a Pompeian merchant's home held a quieter but no less profound spiritual practice. The Lararium, a niche shrine tucked near the kitchen, housed miniature statues of the household gods, the Lares and Penates. Each morning, the matron of the house would offer a pinch of salt or a few grains of wheat, whispering prayers for protection over her family's commerce and health. These weren't generic deities but deeply personal guardians. Archaeologists find Lararia with figurines customized to reflect the household's trade. A baker might have a tiny millstone beside the gods, while a wine merchant placed a clay amphora at their feet. The Romans called this do ut des, I give so that you may give, a reciprocal relationship where even the humblest offering maintained the delicate balance between mortal and divine. Babylon's scholars took celestial devotion in a different direction, translating the movements of planets into a daily guide for earthly decisions. Before laying a building's foundation or signing a contract, a merchant would consult his Baru priest, who tracked Venus and Jupiter across cuneiform tablets. Specific planetary alignments dictated everything from marriage dates to the suitability of selling livestock, a system so precise it could pinpoint unlucky hours within otherwise favorable days. Modern mathematicians have decoded these astrological tablets, revealing astonishingly accurate astronomical calculations buried beneath the mysticism. For instance, the Babylonians knew Venus' 8-year cycle centuries before Greek astronomers documented it, using its appearances to predict market fluctuations and even the likelihood of military conflicts. What unites these traditions is their insistence that spirituality wasn't confined to temples or holy days. it pulsed through every ordinary moment. The Hindu housewife's turmeric-stained fingers, the Aztec priest's blood on the temple stones, the Pompeian merchant's handful of salt, the Babylonian star charts scratched in clay, all testify to a universal human yearning to weave the sacred into the fabric of daily life. They understood something we've often forgotten, that divinity isn't distant but breathes in the spaces between our most mundane acts, waiting only for our attention to make it visible. When an Egyptian surgeon smoothed honey onto a linen bandage and wrapped it around an infected wound, they weren't just applying a folk remedy, they were harnessing biochemistry millennia ahead of its time. Tomb paintings in Saqqara depict this golden salve being used after battlefield surgeries, its thick viscosity creating a sterile barrier while enzymes like glucose oxidase slowly released hydrogen peroxide to kill bacteria. Modern lab tests confirm what papyrus scrolls claimed. Certain Nile Valley honeys inhibit even antibiotic-resistant strains like MRSA. But the real genius lay in their combinations. Mixing honey with crushed garlic for its allicin compound created a potent broad-spectrum antimicrobial, while adding copper flakes from cypress boosted collagen production for faster healing. These weren't haphazard experiments. Edwin Smith papyrus case studies describe precise honey-to-herb ratios for specific injuries, proving systematic clinical observation existed alongside temple healing rituals. In the steaming jungles where Ayurvedic physicians gathered herbs, compresses became living pharmacies. Turmeric root pounded with neem leaves formed bright yellow poultices that reduced inflammation through curcuminoids and nimbidin compounds now isolated in modern arthritis drugs. But the sophistication went deeper. Sushruta Samhita texts detail Vedhana techniques where medicated cloths were warmed over aromatic steam baths infused with ginger and holy basil, their volatile oils penetrating tissues to relieve muscle spasms. Archaeologists excavating Taxila University ruins found terracotta vessels with residue of these preparations, still faintly emitting the camphor scent of ancient pain relief balms. What seems mystical like chanting mantras during application reveals practical roots. Rhythmic sound vibrations helped time the massage strokes that drove herbs into stiff joints, a precursor to today's physiotherapy protocols. High in the Andes, Inca healers performed a practice that makes modern surgeons wince, drilling holes in living skulls to relieve pressure or release evil spirits. Trepanation kits excavated near Cusco contain obsidian blades finer than surgical steel and bronze tumi knives with curved tips designed to lift bone flaps without damaging membranes. Skeletons show astounding survival rates. Some patients endured multiple procedures with healed edges, proving they lived years after. The secret: coca leaves chewed as anesthesia and antiseptic paste from balsam apple vine to prevent infection. While Spanish chroniclers dismissed these operations as barbaric, recent CT scans of pre-Columbian skulls revealed precise avoiding of venous sinuses, evidence that centuries of practice had mapped cranial anatomy through trial and error. Yet for every effective remedy, ancient medical traditions harbored startling misconceptions. Egyptian healing statues channeled water over magical inscriptions to create potions that treated everything from cataracts to infertility, a placebo effect at best. Ayurvedic mercury-based Rasayana tonics promised longevity but caused heavy metal poisoning. The line between science and superstition blurred in ways that challenge modern assumptions. When Assyrian doctors prescribed powdered mummy for epilepsy or Roman physicians recommended wearing amulet bags of menstrual blood to ward off gout, they were working within frameworks where the symbolic and physiological intertwined inseparably. What emerges from these practices isn't a tidy division between primitive and advanced medicine, but a mosaic of intuition and innovation. Willow bark tea relieved pain long before chemists isolated salicylic acid, the foundation of aspirin. Moldy bread poultices on wounds prefigured penicillin by 4,000 years. The healer who didn't understand bacteria nevertheless observed that certain applications prevented pus and fever. These weren't lucky guesses, but the slow accumulation of evidence-based knowledge, passed down through generations in pharmacopoeias etched on temple walls and whispered between midwives. Their legacy lingers every time a burn unit reaches for medical-grade honey or a rheumatologist prescribes turmeric extract, proof that ancient eyes once saw truths our instruments now confirm. In the terraced slopes of the Andes, each step carved into the mountainside wasn't just farmland, it was a living almanac. Inca farmers reading the contours of their fields could predict frosts by observing how mist settled in certain tiers or timed potato planting to the flowering of wild orchids, nature's own calendar. Their agricultural cycles were so precise that modern agronomists still study their drought-resistant quinoa varieties, cultivated in alternating strips to confuse pests. Unlike the rigid solar calendars of Europe, Andean timekeeping moved to the rhythm of ecological signals. When condors nested at lower elevations, it signaled warmer rains were coming. When vicuñas grew thicker coats, harsh winters followed. These observations weren't just practical, they were sacred, tied to the Aini principle of reciprocity. Farmers fed the earth with offerings of chicha beer before taking its bounty, a ritual exchange that sustained both soil and soul. Meanwhile, in the sprawling estates of Byzantium, the Geoponica, a 10-volume farming manual commissioned by Emperor Constantine Roman VII, transformed agriculture into meticulous science. Its pages prescribed exactly when to graft vines during a waning moon, with Jupiter in Taurus, or how to store melons packed in barley husks to absorb ethylene gas. One passage details an ingenious pest control method, hanging hare skulls around vineyards, believing their lingering scent deterred insects. Modern experiments found this oddly effective, not due to superstition, but because decaying bone releases nitrogen compounds that repel certain beetles. The Byzantines even tracked microseasons by observing oak leaves. If they unfurled before the spring equinox, farmers knew to delay sowing lest late frosts kill tender shoots. China's lunar calendars took this precision further, dividing the year into 24 solar terms keyed to celestial and terrestrial events. The arrival of grain rain in late April signaled rice transplantation, while frost descent in October warned orchardists to wrap persimmon trees in straw. Rural almanacs paired these dates with phenological markers. Cuckoos calling meant mulberry leaves were tender enough for silkworms, and fireflies hovering over paddies indicated optimal water temperatures for young rice. The genius lay in localization. A calendar for Hangzhou's wetlands differed from Shaanxi's plains because farmers needed hyper-regional data. Some villages kept bamboo calendars, notching stalks to record decades of rainfall patterns, creating generational databases long before modern meteorology. Contrast this with Mesopotamia's two-field rotation system, humanity's first documented attempt at soil conservation. By alternating barley with fallow periods where sheep grazed the stubble, they naturally fertilized fields with manure while preventing salinization, a scourge that still threatens Iraqi farms today. Cuneiform tablets from Ur detail how temple administrators tracked planting dates using star positions, correlating Sirius's heliacal rising with the optimal window for sowing. Workers even practiced early crop insurance, storing emergency seed reserves in ziggurat granaries under the watch of Nisaba, the scribe goddess who protected agricultural records. What unites these systems is their recognition that farming wasn't just labor. It was dialogue, the Inca listening to condors, the Byzantine scribe noting Jupiter's transit, the Chinese villager notching bamboo, the Mesopotamian priest scanning for Sirius. All understood that abundance required harmonizing with forces beyond human control. Their almanacs weren't mere tools but acts of humility, acknowledging that the Earth's wisdom often outstripped their own. In an age of satellite-guided tractors and genetically modified seeds, their legacy whispers a question: have we lost more than we've gained by replacing observation with algorithms? The terraces, parchments, and notched bamboos suggest that the truest calendar might still be written in the language of leaves, birds, and stars. The glow of a Damascus forge wasn't just heat, it was alchemy in motion. When a Syrian bladesmith folded layers of woot steel, each hammer strike did more than shape metal. It trapped microscopic carbides in a swirling matrix, creating blades so sharp they could slice a falling silk scarf, and so resilient they reportedly shattered lesser swords on impact. But the true marvel lay in the apprenticeship behind each weapon. A master smith might spend a decade teaching his pupil just to read the steel's watered patterns, those rippling bands that revealed the alloy's soul. Guilds guarded these techniques with rituals worthy of spy novels. Raw materials were coded as moon tiers in ledgers, furnaces were deliberately misaligned to mislead outsiders, and finished blades were quenched in mysterious brews of pomegranate rind and goat's blood. Modern metallurgists have spent centuries trying to replicate the process, only to realize the secret wasn't just chemistry, it was the smith's intimate dance with fire, a knowledge passed fingertip to fingertip like a living flame. On the shores of Sidon, Phoenician glassblowers orchestrated an equally mesmerizing ballet of breath and molten silica. Their workshops clustered near beaches where the sand's unique mineral content, rich in natron and lime, yielded glass so clear Roman elites called it frozen ocean. But transparency wasn't their only triumph. By wrapping threads of gold leaf between layers of glass, they created the first millefeury beads, each one a miniature universe of swirling color. Apprentices began by mastering the bellows, learning to sustain breath pressure so precise it could inflate a vase's neck without bursting the base. Only after years of this grueling work would they touch a blowpipe. The guild's ultimate test, crafting an amphoriscos, a tiny perfume vial with walls thinner than an insect's wing. Fail, and your piece shattered into the discard pit. Succeed, and you earn the right to add your maker's mark not with a signature, but with a unique color blend like the legendary Tyrian rose achieved by adding crushed sea snail glands to the melt. In the misty riverbeds of Aotearoa, Maori Tohunga Wakero jade carvers approached their craft as a spiritual covenant. Greenstone wasn't merely rock, it was the frozen blood of Paunamu, their ancestral water deity. Before even touching a chisel, apprentices spent months sitting with raw boulders, learning to listen for the hidden shapes within. The tools themselves were sacred. Sandstone grinders infused with shark oil, drill bits tipped with diamond-hard moa bone. A single high-ticky pendant might consume 300 hours of polishing, the final strokes done with a paste of fern root and human saliva, an enzyme mix that gave the jade its legendary luster. Guild elders protected design lore through Wakapapa genealogical chants, encoding carving patterns in stories about the gods. To outsiders, a spiral might look decorative. To initiates, it narrated the creation myth of Rangi and Papa. The penalty for stealing techniques, spiritual exile, a curse ensuring no one would trade with the thief, leaving their families starved of both food and honor. What binds these traditions isn't just skill, but the sacredness of their transmission. Damascus smiths saw steel as a living thing, Phoenicians treated glass formulas like state secrets, and Maori carvers believed flawed work summoned ancestral wrath. Their guilds weren't mere trade unions, they were the keepers of cultural DNA, ensuring knowledge outlived individuals. In an age of 3D printed replicas and YouTube tutorials, their legacy challenges us. When craftsmanship becomes disposable, what wisdom might we be losing beyond the technique itself? Perhaps the answer lies not in the blade's edge or the bead's glow, but in the patient, trembling hands of the apprentice who earned them. Dipping his reed pen into a cake of soot-black ink, an Egyptian scribe poised his hand above a fresh sheet of papyrus, each stroke of his Calamos pen carrying the weight of eternity. These humble tools, carved from the stems of marsh reeds with knife-sharp tips, were precision instruments, scribes chewed the ends to separate fibers into brushes, adjusting flexibility for hieroglyphs, bold outlines, or hieratic scripts flowing cursive. The ink itself was chemistry in action. Carbon soot mixed with gum arabic created waterproof pigment, while red ochre from desert cliffs marked important texts, literally setting them apart in crimson. Every aspect of writing was sacred. Discarded scraps were buried ceremonially, for words held the power of Heka, the magic that shaped reality. Half a world away, a Chinese scholar grinding an ink stick against his stone palette embodied an entirely different philosophy of writing. Where Egyptian pens scraped, Chinese brushes danced, made from wolf, rabbit, or even tiger tail hairs bound to bamboo. Each brush was an extension of the body's chi. Calligraphers spoke of bones in strong downward strokes and flesh in graceful sweeps, their wrists pivoting like herons taking flight. The ink's consistency required ritual attention. Too thick and characters cracked like drought-stricken earth, too thin and they bled like tears. This wasn't merely record-keeping, it was meditation in motion, where the rhythm of breathing synchronized with brushstrokes to create a living script. For durability, nothing rivaled the Maya's bark paper codices, folded screens of fig bark pounded thin as parchment, then coated with lime plaster for a gleaming white surface. Scribes painted glyphs in vibrant mineral pigments, jade dust greens, cochineal reds, and Maya blue, a hue so chemically stable it outlasted empires. These weren't just books but celestial maps. The Dresden Codex's Venus tables predicted the planet's cycles within a day's era over 500 years. Spanish bishops burned most as devil's work, but surviving fragments reveal intricate calculations, proof that Mesoamerican scribes rivaled Babylon's astronomers. Meanwhile, in Nineveh's shadow, Assyrian librarians baked wisdom into clay. Their cuneiform tablets, wedged symbols pressed into wet mud, were fired into near indestructible bricks. King Ashurbanipal's library held over 30,000, organized by subject, with summary tablets acting as ancient search engines. A medical text might sit beside omen records, their edges stamped with punch marks indicating shelf location. Even their mistakes were preserved. Scribes added notes like "old copy, do not trust" to flawed tablets, creating history's first error correction system. What unites these traditions isn't just their tools, but their reverence for knowledge as a bridge between worlds. The Egyptian scribes' papyrus connected earthly decrees to the afterlife. The Chinese calligrapher's brush channeled cosmic harmony onto silk. The Mayas' painted codices held the mathematics of time itself, and Assyria's clay tablets turned whispers of long-dead merchants into eternal echoes. When we tap keys on screens today, we've lost something fundamental: the tactile sacrament of writing, where every mark was a pact between hand, mind, and the unyielding hunger to make thought endure. The streets of Athens buzzed with a frenzy unlike any other time of year, wood shavings littering the cobbles from last-minute mask carving, the scent of fermenting grapes thick in the air as vats of new wine were rolled into the theater district. Days before the Dionysia festival, the city transformed into a whirlwind of creative chaos. Families pooled their finest fabrics to stitch elaborate chittons for chorus members, while armorers repurposed leather scraps into satyr costumes, stitching goat hair tails and crafting phalluses from stuffed lambskin. Even the poorest citizen-contributed children plucked ivy from walls to weave into wreaths, and prostitutes donated their mirrored cosmetics to actors who'd soon stride the stage as gods. The city's rigid hierarchies dissolved temporarily. A wealthy merchant might find himself elbow-deep in dye vats alongside a potter's apprentice, both laboring to achieve the perfect saffron yellow for Dionysus robes. Meanwhile, in Cusco's sun-baked plazas, the weeks preceding in Tiremi saw the Inca Empire halt entirely. Farmers abandoned terraces, soldiers laid down their weapons, and administrators locked their quipu records. Every hand turned toward the sun god's great feast. Women ground dried llama blood into paste for ritual body paint, their fingers stained crimson as they debated which shades would best honor Intai's radiance. In palace kitchens, teams of virgins selected for their purity kneaded dough for ceremonial cornbread, shaping each loaf into solar discs studded with quinoa. The air rang with the rhythmic pounding of hundreds of mortars as chicha brewers mashed purple maize, fermenting it in gargantuan urns buried in warm earth to accelerate the process. Even the empire's famed roads grew crowded with processions, tribute bearers hauling live condors from distant peaks, their wings bound in gold thread to prevent escape before the sacrifice. The scale of preparation defied modern imagination. For Athens' dramatic competitions, playwrights like Sophocles had mere weeks to train their choruses, often 50 untrained citizens, to sing, dance, and move in hypnotic unison. Rehearsals spilled into olive groves at dawn, where flute players drilled the complex modes said to channel Dionysus' ecstasy. Backstage, mask makers worked miracles with linen and plaster, layering strips over molds to create lightweight yet eerily expressive faces. A single slip could ruin weeks of work. If the mouth hole didn't align perfectly, an actor's voice would muffle, dooming the performance. The pressure was cosmic. Winning plays earned their sponsors bragging rights for years, while failed productions might incite riots. In the Andes, the stakes were even higher. Priests scrutinized every detail of Inti Raymi's ritual regalia. If a tunic's gold threads didn't catch the solstice sunrise at precisely the right angle, it signaled divine displeasure. Teenage runners, bred for speed since childhood, relayed last-minute messages between mountaintop shrines and the capital, their lungs burning in the thin air. On the eve of the festival, the Sapa Inca himself inspected sacrificial llamas, ensuring their coats were unblemished white, their fleeces combed with silver dust to shimmer like the Milky Way. The animals' entrails would later be read as celestial messages, determining whether the empire prospered or faltered in the coming year. What united these frenzied preparations across continents was their temporary suspension of reality. Athenian slaves enjoyed rare freedoms during Dionysia. Some even performed in comedies mocking their masters. Inca commoners dined on banquets typically reserved for nobles, their plates heaped with roasted kai and sweet potatoes glazed in molasses. The chaos wasn't incidental, it was the point. By upending norms, whether through wine-soaked revelry or sanctioned role reversals, these festivals reaffirmed societal bonds. The potter who painted a senator's face one day would return to his wheel the next, but the memory of shared creation lingered, woven into the fabric of community like gold thread through a royal mantle. At dawn in the Spartan agoge, boys as young as 7 learned pain wasn't an obstacle, it was the curriculum. Their training began not with weapons but with starvation. Left to forage in the Teotihuacan mountains, they'd steal cheese from altars guarded by whip-wielding men, mastering stealth under threat of lashings. By 12, they graduated to the diamastagosis, a brutal endurance ritual where teams competed to steal food from each other's camps, their bruised bodies glistening with olive oil to make grappling harder. But the real test came at night, sleeping on beds of reeds torn from the Eurotas River with their bare hands, their calloused fingertips proof of labor woven into every hour. This wasn't just military training, it was the total erasure of softness, where even stealing a single fig without getting caught honed the spatial awareness needed for phalanx warfare. Meanwhile, on the Mongolian steppes, children learned archery before they could walk. Strapped to their mothers' backs during hunts, they absorbed the rhythm of galloping horses and drawn bows through vibration. By 5, they practiced shooting melon-sized targets from horseback at full speed, a skill later refined by firing arrows under their mount's neck to skewer enemies below. Their secret, turning travel into training. Every journey became a drill. Boys would hang upside down from saddles to build core strength for shooting in any position, or knock arrows while balancing on cantering horses to simulate chaos. Even their games were lethal lessons. Bushkashi, a polo-like sport played with a goat carcass, taught riders to pivot at full gallop, the same move used to evade Chinese cavalry spears. In the Zulu kraals, young warriors transformed sticks into swords through entonga sparring. These weren't playful bouts. Fighters coated their knobkerrie clubs in ash to mark strikes that would be fatal in battle, their footwork mirroring the shifting formations of Shaka's famed buffalo horns tactic. But the true genius lay in how these drills blurred into daily chores. Herding cattle became agility training as boys dodged thrown stones, while fetching water from distant rivers built the endurance needed for marathon raids. The Zulus' legendary mobility, covering 50 miles a day in cowhide sandals, wasn't innate. It was cultivated through generations of turning every step into conditioning. Compare this to the samurai's paradoxical fusion of lethality and refinement. Dawn might find them practicing kyujutsu, shooting arrows from kneeling positions to strengthen discipline, while dusk brought tea ceremonies where the precise angle of a whisk mirrored sword strike angles. Their kenjutsu manuals prescribed meditation before sparring, believing clarity of mind decided battles before blades crossed. This wasn't just skill. It was somatic philosophy, where the same hand that wielded a katana must pour tea without spilling a drop, proving control extended beyond combat. Vikings took a different approach, integrating warfare into social bonds. Their phalag system required crews to train together year-round, not just during raids. Winter nights in longhouses were spent playing Hnefatafel, a strategy game simulating coastal ambushes, while shield wall drills doubled as harvest festivals, men locking formation to the rhythm of barley grinding songs. When these farmers turned, raiders stood shoulder to shoulder in actual battle. Their cohesion wasn't luck, it was muscle memory forged during peacetime labor. What united these traditions was their refusal to compartmentalize combat. For the Spartan, every stolen bite honed battlefield awareness. For the Mongol, archery was as natural as breathing. The Zulus' chores were drills in disguise, the samurai's tea ritual was swordsmanship slowed down, and the Vikings' games rehearsed invasions. Their brilliance lay in making martial prowess inseparable from existence, not an exception to daily life, but its very texture. When we separate training from living today, we've lost something essential: the recognition that mastery isn't confined to gyms or dojos, but woven into every ordinary act. Under the vast Pacific skies, Polynesian navigators didn't just sail, they danced with the stars, their canoes guided by a celestial compass etched into memory rather than parchment. Imagine standing on the deck of a double-hulled wire, the horizon empty in every direction, yet your course as precise as if traced on a map. The key was the Cape Huwetu, or star compass, a mental grid dividing the sky into 32 houses, each anchored by rising and setting stars like Hoculaire Arcturus and Hicyonalia Spica. These weren't just points of light, they were ancestral signposts. Navigators memorized their exact bearings at different latitudes, knowing that when Hoculaire rose 2 handspans above the horizon at dawn, they were on course for Tahiti. But stars alone weren't enough. They read the ocean itself, swell patterns refracting around unseen islands, phosphorescent plankton blooms signaling currents. Even the flight paths of Noyo turns at dusk, whose return flights pointed toward land like living arrows. The true test of mastery, sailing from Hawaii to Tahiti, a 400-mile journey without instruments, a feat modern sailors with GPS still find humbling. Meanwhile, in the fog-choked waters of the North Atlantic, Viking navigators faced a different challenge: endless overcast skies where stars vanished for weeks. Their solution, the solarstein or sunstone, a crystal of Icelandic spar that polarized sunlight even through thick cloud cover. By rotating the stone until light patterns aligned, they could pinpoint the sun's position with eerie accuracy, like a natural GPS. Archaeologists testing replicas in Arctic conditions found they worked within 5 degrees of precision, enough to guide longships from Norway to Newfoundland. But Vikings also relied on landvertier, environmental cues woven into oral sagas. A passage in the Groenland Inca saga describes using the color of seawater to detect ice fields, while the Rotholf's Thotta mentions judging latitude by how high the midday sun hung above winter icebergs. Their greatest innovation, though, may have been the Vendrosa, a wooden disc etched with wind patterns. Captains memorized how coastal breezes shifted near landmarks, a salty form of muscle memory that turned gusts into guides. On the sun-baked shores of Carthage, Phoenician pilots took a more tactile approach. Their periploi, or sailing logs, catalogued coastal features with poetic precision. Beyond the Pillars of Hercules, sail 5 days until the cliffs turn the color of aged copper, then anchor where the seabed smells of juniper. They mapped the Mediterranean not in miles but in smells, sounds, and sediment. A handful of sand hauled up in a wax-lined lead weight could reveal their location. Black volcanic grains meant Sicily was near, while golden flecks hinted at Egyptian Nile silt. Their most ingenious trick, using homing pigeons as biological autopilots. Released from cages at sea, the birds would circle once, then fly unerringly toward the nearest land, giving captains a living compass. Recent experiments proved their reliability. Pigeons can detect Earth's magnetic fields through specialized beak cells, a built-in navigation system we're only beginning to understand. What united these traditions was their deep dialogue with nature. The Polynesian who chanted star paths, the Viking spinning his sunstone, the Phoenician sniffing the wind, all understood that true navigation wasn't about conquering the elements but collaborating with them. In an age of satellite waypoints, their wisdom whispers a question: have we lost something vital by outsourcing our sense of direction to machines? The stars still rise, the waves still whisper, and the birds still know the way home. All we've lost is the patience to listen. In the bustling port cities of the Roman Empire, the air carried a scent both revolting and irresistible: garum, the fermented fish sauce that fueled legions and flavored feasts. Picture rows of clay dolia jars buried up to their necks in sun-baked courtyards, each brimming with layers of mackerel guts, sea salt, and aromatic herbs like dill and coriander. Left to rot for months under the Mediterranean sun, the mixture liquefied into a briny amber elixir, strained through woven baskets into amphorae stamped with the producer's name. This wasn't just condiment production, it was biochemistry harnessed through putrefaction. The high salt content suppressed harmful bacteria while encouraging enzymatic breakdown, transforming scraps into a protein-rich umami balm. Pliny the Elder called it the luxury of all sauces, but garum's true genius lay in its shelf life. Sealed amphorae excavated from shipwrecks still hold traces edible after 2 millennia. Workers in Pompeii's garum shops suffered burns from the caustic brine, yet their labor created a staple so valuable it circulated from Britannia to the Black Sea, proving that sometimes the most pungent preservations become civilization's lifeblood. Meanwhile, in the frozen fjords of Greenland, Inuit hunters practiced a very different kind of alchemy: meat caching. When a successful seal hunt yielded more than the tribe could consume, they carved ice cellars into permafrost, lining them with cleaned stones and layers of sealskin. The real magic happened with the choice of cuts. Flippers and blubber were buried separately from lean muscle, each requiring precise conditions to avoid freezer burn. A skilled hunter could read the ice's texture, knowing when to rotate carcasses to prevent uneven thawing. But the piece de resistance was kiviak: hundreds of tiny orcs stuffed whole into a hollowed-out seal skin, sealed with blubber, and left to ferment under rocks for months. The result, a delicacy where the bird's bones softened into edible paste, their fermented flesh a winter survival food packed with vitamin C. Unlike garum's stinging salinity, kiviak relied on anaerobic fermentation, a process modern science confirms produces beneficial probiotics that aided digestion during months of meat-heavy diets. Down in Mesopotamia's sun-scorched plains, brewers harnessed fermentation's power not for preservation alone but for purification. Their beer, a thick porridge-like brew called sikaru, wasn't just the world's first happy hour, it was a lifesaver. By boiling barley mash in ceramic vats, then fermenting it with date palm sugars, they created a beverage safer to drink than Euphrates water tainted with parasites. Temple records from detail ration distributions. Workers received up to 5 liters daily, their wages paid in liquid bread. The process was sacred. Goddess Ninkosi's hymn doubled as a brewing recipe, its verses encoding steps like malting grain on reed mats. Modern recreations reveal the beer's low alcohol content, around 3%, but high nutritional value, packed with B vitamins from the lingering yeast. Unlike Roman garum factories or Inuit ice caches, Mesopotamian breweries were egalitarian spaces where laborers and elites drank from the same communal straws, proving that preservation could also mean communion. Salt became the silent architect of these systems. Roman garum vats demanded Mediterranean sea salt by the ton, while Inuit hunters traded for inland mineral deposits to cure walrus hides. But Persia's Yakchal's ice houses turned scarcity into abundance. These towering mud brick domes, some reaching 60 feet high, trapped winter cold with insulating straw and clay walls. Workers hauled glacier ice from mountaintops, layering it with salt to lower the melting point, creating year-round refrigeration. Merchants stored not just food here, but delicate medicines and royal delicacies like rosewater sorbets. The Yakchal's genius lay in its wind catcher vents, funnel-shaped towers that drew breezes over subterranean ice chambers, creating a natural air conditioning system that kept temperatures below freezing even in midsummer. What unites these methods is their dialogue with necessity. The Romans turned putrid fish into gold, the Inuit coaxed probiotics from frozen seabirds, and the Mesopotamians transformed murky water into sacred beer. Salt and ice weren't just tools, they were collaborators in an ancient dance against decay. When we refrigerate leftovers today, we're continuing a chain of innovation that began with stone-lined caches and sun-baked amphorae, proving that hunger has always been the mother of invention. In the shadow of Confucian family compounds, filial piety wasn't just virtue, it was the mortar holding society together. Picture an aging scholar in Han Dynasty China, his joints stiff with decades of brushwork, yet still presiding over morning tea ceremonies. His children would rise before dawn to prepare his favorite chrysanthemum infusion, believed to clear the clouded vision of elder years, while daughters-in-law massaged his feet with warming ginger paste. The classic of filial piety dictated even the angle of bowing, a precise 45 degrees when serving parents medicine, symbolizing the balance between reverence and practicality. But this care extended beyond ritual. Medical texts like the Huangdi Nijing prescribed tailored elder diets, lotus root congee for weak digestion, goji berry stews to nourish the ancestral kai. Multi-generational homes featured raised bedroom platforms to protect against dampness, while courtyard gardens offered accessible spaces for gentle movement. The true stroke of genius, retirement wasn't abandonment. Elder statesmen became family archivists, teaching grandchildren calligraphy while transcribing clan histories, their wisdom preserved like precious ink on silk. Across the windswept moors of Celtic Britain, elders assumed a different but equally vital role as living libraries. In roundhouses fragrant with peat smoke, grandmothers would supervise the memorization of genealogies stretching back 20 generations, their voices rising and falling like bards recounting epic tales. The secret to their recall: mnemonic walks along stone-marked trails where each menhir triggered another passage of law or lore. Herbal wisdom passed through matriarchal lines, elderflower cordials for spring fevers, yarrow poultices for winter aches, with each recipe wrapped in stories about the Tuatha De Danann. Even senility found purpose. The Irish believed the foggy-minded could see through time, their ramblings scanned for prophetic fragments. Unlike Confucian hierarchies, Celtic elder care was reciprocal. While youths tended physical needs, the aged reciprocated by safeguarding collective memory in verses so rhythmically precise they survived centuries of oral transmission before being written down. Roman retirement took a more luxurious turn along the Bay of Naples, where sprawling villae maritimi catered to every geriatric whim. Wealthy senators soaked in geothermal pools fed by underground springs, their aching muscles soothed by enslaved therapists trained in Alexandrian medicine. Galen himself recommended these seaside retreats for their temperate breezes and vista of endless blue, an early prescription for what we now call thalassotherapy. But even these pleasure palaces served medical purposes. Mosaic floors depicted labyrinth patterns to stimulate cognitive exercise, while pergolas dripped with medicinal vines like columbine for gout. The middle classes practiced preventative care through collegiaceum, elder guilds pooling resources for joint annuities and funeral clubs. Remarkably egalitarian for their time, these collectives ensured even freedmen could retire with dignity. Their final years spent playing latrunculi board games in collegium gardens lush with healing herbs. From the Andes to Anatolia, herbs became nature's palliative care. Quechua healers brewed muño mint tea to ease elders' altitude sickness, while Hittite priests burned juniper berries to clear the death mist from sick rooms. Ayurvedic texts detailed rasayana therapies, milk steeped with golden ashwagandha root to rebuild aging tissues, sesame oil massages to keep joints supple. The Ainu of Hokkaido took a startlingly modern approach. Their mercury mouth harps provided vibrational therapy for Parkinson's tremors, while fermented bear bile ointments, an early NSAID alternative, reduced arthritis inflammation. What united these traditions was their acknowledgement that elderhood wasn't decline, it was transformation. The Confucian scholar became a living ancestor, the Celtic crone a walking archive, the Roman retiree a patron of philosophy. They understood what modern societies often forget. When we care for the old, we're not just tending bodies, we're stewarding the very roots of culture. Their herbs, homes, and rituals whisper an urgent truth. A civilization's greatness can be measured by how it honors those who planted the seeds. Along the lifeless banks of the Nile, where the desert winds whispered secrets of eternity, Egyptian embalmers performed their sacred alchemy. The process began with a hooked bronze rod slid through the nostril, carefully fracturing the ethmoid bone to extract the brain in fragments, not out of disrespect, but to preserve the facial structure for the afterlife. Next came the slit along the left flank, where organs were removed and desiccated in canopic jars filled with natron, a salt mixture so potent it could leach moisture from a corpse in 40 days. But the true genius lay in the details. Linen pads under the skin restored plumpness to withered limbs, onion plugs filled hollow eye sockets, and fragrant resins sealed the body against decay. This wasn't just preservation, it was a cosmic insurance policy, ensuring every vessel and amulet, from golden scarabs over the heart to falcon-headed stoppers on organ jars, would guide the soul through Juat's treacherous waters. A world away on the arid coasts of Chile, the Chinchorro people perfected an even older art, smoked mummification. Using sea lion bones as chisels, they disassembled bodies completely, skin peeled back, muscles separated, bones boiled to remove marrow, before reconstructing them with startling realism. Twigs reinforced broken limbs, ash paste filled hollow cavities, and entire faces were re-sculpted over skulls with clay, painted black with manganese or red with ochre to symbolize rebirth. Some corpses wore intricate wigs of human hair, their strands knotted with seaweed cored in patterns mimicking the waves that sustained this fishing culture. Unlike Egypt's elite-focused practices, Chinchorro mummies included everyone: infants, the elderly, even miscarried fetuses, proving their belief that death was a democracy where all deserved transformation. Now ascend to Tibet's wind-scoured plateaus, where death took on an almost brutalist honesty. Sky burials began at dawn as Rogiapa's body breakers recited mantras over the deceased before methodically dismembering them with ceremonial knives. Vultures considered dakinis or celestial messengers descended upon the flesh, bones crushed and mixed with tsampa flour to ensure no morsel remained. To Western eyes, this might seem harsh, but to Tibetans it was the ultimate generosity, returning the body to the cycle of life without clinging to material form. The speed of consumption even held spiritual significance. Swift devourment signaled a virtuous life, while hesitant birds prompted prayers for the soul's unresolved karma. Back in the bustling insulae of Rome, death remained a daily companion. Household Lararia shrines held wax death masks of ancestors, their stern faces illuminated during morning offerings of wine and honey cakes. These weren't mere decorations but active participants in family life. Patricians consulted them before business deals by interpreting the flicker of candlelight on their features. Meanwhile, in Han Dynasty China, spirit tablets inscribed with ancestors' names became conduits between realms. Placed on altars fragrant with sandalwood, these lacquered slips received offerings of rice and tea, their surfaces ritually cleaned with willow branches to clear the path for communication. During Qingming festival, families picnic at grave sites, leaving chrysanthemums symbols of longevity and burning joss paper replicas of modern luxuries, iPhones, designer bags, to equip loved ones for the afterlife's latest trends. What unites these traditions is their refusal to relegate death to the shadows. The Egyptian who stocked tombs with board games for eternity, the Chinchorro mother who repainted her child's clay face annually, the Tibetan who welcomed vultures as angels, the Roman who toasted his grandfather's mask with Falanian wine, all understood that the departed remain woven into life's fabric. Their rituals whisper across millennia. Grief needs ceremony, memory demands embodiment, and perhaps the dead stay with us precisely because we keep feeding them, whether with natron, smoke, or simple remembrance. Beneath the shade of an olive tree in Athens' Agora, crowds gathered not just to trade goods but to trade ideas, every citizen's voice carrying equal weight in the world's first experiment in direct democracy. At dawn, laborers and landowners alike would line up to receive their panakion, a bronze identification ticket, before entering the Phoenix, an open-air amphitheater where speeches echoed like thunder. Here, debates crackled over everything from grain shipments to declarations of war, with timekeepers using water clocks to ensure no speaker monopolized the floor. The real stroke of genius, ostracism, a yearly vote where citizens could exile any individual deemed too powerful by scratching names onto pottery shards. This wasn't just majority rule, it was a system designed to prevent tyranny through collective vigilance, where even pericles faced scrutiny from a fishmonger or potter. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the Iroquois Confederacy wove governance into the fabric of daily life through the great law of peace. Clan mothers gathered in longhouses to deliberate until unanimous agreement was reached, their discussions guided by the metaphor of a single canoe. No one could paddle in opposition without capsizing the vessel. Disputes between nations were settled not by force but through the condolence ceremony, where wampum belts encoded treaties in intricate shell patterns. Each bead's position held meaning, turning diplomacy into a tactile language. When European colonists arrived, they were stunned by this system's sophistication. Benjamin Franklin later borrowed its Federalist principles when drafting the Articles of Confederation. The Iroquois didn't just vote, they listened until every voice found harmony, proving that consensus could be stronger than coercion. In the bustling markets of Pataliputra, Mauryan tax collectors moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, their methods etched into the Arthashastra, an ancient treatise on statecraft. Farmers paid their dues not in coin but in grain, stored in royal granaries as buffer against famine. What set this system apart was its granular fairness. Inspectors assessed soil quality to adjust rates, while scribes logged transactions on palm leaf ledgers waterproofed with lacquer. Corruption was deterred through brutal transparency. Officials caught skimming faced public reckonings where their accounts were read aloud beside the emperor's flawless records. But the true innovation lay in civic participation. Village assemblies called sabahs settled local disputes under banyan trees, their rulings binding unless overturned by higher courts. Unlike Athens' raucous debates or the Iroquois' silent consensus, Mauryan governance blended hierarchy with grassroots input, creating stability across a subcontinent of competing cultures. From the agoras shouting matches to the longhouses' murmured agreements, these systems shared a common thread. Governance wasn't confined to palaces. It flourished in sunlight, where every decision, whether scratched on pottery, woven into wampum, or inked onto palm leaves, reminded people that order wasn't imposed from above. It was built daily, conversation by conversation, stone by stone. When we scroll through news feeds or queue at polling stations today, we're walking paths first paved by those who believed even the humblest voice could shape destiny. Inside the echoing chambers of India's Ajanta caves, sunlight filters through rock-cut windows to illuminate murals that pulse with life centuries after their creation. Here, Buddhist monks and unnamed artisans transformed volcanic basalt into canvases, using brushes made from squirrel tail hairs and pigments ground from lapis lazuli, cinnabar, and crushed seashells. Their scenes of lotus-covered ponds and celestial musicians weren't just decorations. They were visual scriptures designed to guide meditation through color and form. The true mastery, these artists worked without preliminary sketches, painting directly onto damp plaster so mineral-rich pigments fused permanently with the wall, a technique called fresco secco that made the colors breathe with the stone itself. Yet for all their sacred grandeur, the caves also reveal whimsical touches. A monkey offering honey to the Buddha, elephants playfully splashing in a river, proof that even devotional art could hold space for joy. Half a world away, Celtic metalsmiths twisted gold and silver into knots so complex they seemed to defy physics. The Book of Kells illuminated manuscripts with their labyrinthine interlacings weren't mere ornamentation, they encoded cosmology. Spirals represented eternal cycles, triskells echoed the triad of land, sea, and sky, and never-ending loops symbolized the interconnectedness of all things. Craftsmen used compasses forged from deer antlers to achieve geometric precision, while zoomorphic designs morphed seamlessly from serpent to bird, celebrating the fluidity of nature. Unlike Ajanta's murals, which proclaimed religious narratives, Celtic knots whispered their meanings through pattern, a visual language where spirituality and mathematics danced together. From Byzantine mosaics shimmering with gold tesserae to Andean textiles that wove census data into vibrant quipu knots, art straddled the sacred and practical. Egyptian tomb painters followed strict canons, deities always depicted in profile, hands clenched in ritual gestures, yet their studio ostraca practice fragments reveal playful sketches of cats stealing fish or laborers napping. Even pharaohs commissioned art harbored subtext. A farmer's bent back in a harvest scene might carry quiet commentary on inequality, while a child clutching a parent's leg during a royal procession hinted at universal tenderness beyond propaganda. The quipu makers of the Andes elevated this duality further. These intricate chord assemblies, often dismissed as mere accounting tools, were in fact multisensory narratives. Knots denoted numbers, but colors and fiber types could recount battles or myths: crimson for bloodshed, camelid wool for mountain deities. A single quipu might track maize stores while secretly encoding a rebellion's plans, proving that art and data weren't opposites but partners. What unites these traditions is their refusal to separate beauty from function. The Ajanta painter and Celtic scribe, the pharaonic artisan and Andean knot keeper, all understood that creativity thrives in the space between devotion and daily life. Their legacy challenges modern divides between high and folk art, whispering that the truest expressions often emerge when sacred intention meets human imperfection. From the disciplined dawn rituals of Egyptian priests to the Vikings' mastery of seasonal sleep cycles, these 35 ancient habits weren't just personal routines. They were the invisible architecture of civilizations. Consider how Sparta's brutal agoge training forged warriors who valued collective strength over individual comfort, or how the Maya's celestial farming calendars turned unpredictable jungles into breadbaskets. Every sip of Roman garum, every knot in an Andean quipu, every stroke of a Chinese calligrapher's brush was a thread in a vast tapestry of communal survival and cultural identity. The shocking part, modern science now confirms what intuition taught our ancestors: the siesta's alignment with our circadian dips, the antibacterial genius of honey-dressed wounds, even the cognitive benefits of walking meetings reminiscent of Aristotle's peripatetic lectures. These practices offer more than historical trivia. They're mirrors reflecting our own fragmented lives. Could reviving the Inca's trial marriages ease modern divorce rates? Might Carthage's perfume tracking techniques inspire new approaches to sensory marketing? The answers lie in the comments. Tell us which ancient habit you'd resurrect. Would you trade your alarm clock for a Babylonian shadow tracker, or swap caffeine for a Viking skyer breakfast? Your ancestors left blueprints in the sands of time. The real mystery is why we ever stopped following them. For more journeys into humanity's forgotten wisdom, don't just scroll, subscribe. The past isn't dead weight, it's a toolbox. And the next video, let's just say we're dusting off a Roman invention that could revolutionize your kitchen. Until then, remember, the future belongs to those who listen to the whispers of history.